2023, and the time is 6:01. And I will call to order this regular meeting of the Town of Mead Board of Trustees. In accordance with the town's remote participation and remote meeting policy adopted by the Board of Trustees on March 13th, 2023 by resolution number 21-R/2023, today's regular meeting will be conducted as a remote meeting due to the construction in the boardroom. I'd like to remind everyone present, both in person and virtually, of the town's general guidelines for public comment at open meetings and public hearings. Copies of these guidelines are available online. There are 2 public comment opportunities on the agenda for you to address the board on any subject, whether it is on the agenda or not. There will also be time to comment during the parking regulations public hearing tonight. That item will be 10B. Mary, roll call, please.
Mayor Whitlow.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Cartwright. Trustee Adams.
Here.
Trustee Broadhead. Trustee Harris.
Here.
Trustee Parr.
Here.
Trustee Schranz.
Here.
Mayor Whitlow, today is Tuesday, May 30th, 2023, and you do have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Memorial Day was celebrated yesterday in a way to honor and mourn those military personnel who have died while serving our country. Please join me in a moment of silence for those who have died in service of our country. Thank you very much for your time. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mayor Whitlow, can I recognize that the town attorney, Joshua Meyer, representative, is on the Zoom meeting link.
Thank you very much.
He has his hand raised. I don't know if he has something to say.
Mr. Myers?
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, great. I was just going to let you know, I'm actually having a little bit of difficulty hearing the mayor whenever you're speaking. I don't know if there's an audio issue that's occurring. I could hear you fine until one of the board members spoke up who's remote right now, and then all of a sudden your audio just went right out.
I'll turn my volume all the way up for you and those who can hardly hear me. So I will try to speak louder for you and for those who are online with us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I apologize for that, Mayor.
No worries. No worries. Glad you're here with us.
I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. All right, next is our review and approve agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda this evening? Okay, may I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Thank you very much. Roll call, please.
Trustee Harris.
Yes.
Trustee Adams.
Yes.
Trustee Schranz.
Yes.
Trustee Parr.
Yes.
Mayor Whitlow.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have an agenda for this evening. Next is our staff report by our town manager. I'd like to have the podium.
Thank you, Mayor. You have my report. I do have a couple of things I'd like to highlight. First of all, our RFQ for a prosecuting attorney will be going out later this week. As you know, our prosecutor resigned. We anticipated it. She's been nearing retirement age, so we'll be looking for a new one. Hopefully we'll find somebody shortly. Also, I did want to reach out to the board. We'd like to schedule a retreat in July to talk about the 2024 budget, capital projects, just some background issues of different things that we need to talk about. Affordable housing, like to get the board's input on that. You know, we need to get back to the county on that. So we have some dates. We are thinking either an off Monday, like we've done before, where we'd meet at like 5:30 on either the 17th or the 24th of July, or any of the Saturdays in July. So those are and I was gonna ask Mary to put out a doodle poll. So if you would just start thinking about it, because the budget is creeping up on us already. And as you know from Erica's presentation last time, we have a number of capital projects that will be moving into 2024. So we kind of have to let you all know what we have going on and find out if you agree with all the moving forward with everything, and if there's other things that you'd like us to consider.
Is it possible to do it before July 14th?
Well, we could do it on July 8th, Saturday.
Yeah, I won't be available. I'll be out of country,
Okay,
so.
Yeah.
If we could work on the earlier part of July, that would
okay,
be a lot.
great.
Thank you.
So our
Okay.
meeting's what, July 3rd, or are we not doing that one because of Independence Day, is that like,
Yeah.
when's our regular meetings that month?
Regular meetings on the 10th, the
It
10th
is
and
on
the
the
31st.
10th and the 31st.
Our regular
Sorry.
meetings for July.
And you know, we can always come up with another date if we have to, but if we have to, we could spill it into August, but I'd really like to get some direction, that we have a lot of things that we have to get the pieces and parts put together, so. And that's it, that's my report. If you have any questions.
Questions, comments? Trustee, do you have any questions, comments? Trustee Adams, do you have any questions or comments for Helen?
No, I've read her report. Everything sounds good, and I'll just throw that out there for the request. The 8th does work for me as well.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Helen, for your report.
I do have a question of Helen, nothing to do with the manager's report though, but it has to do with an email sent out about the current position of the Mead Town Center. Is that how and if, does that affect us? Is there anything good that's gonna come out of this?
Well, at this point, all that we know is there's been a new deed issued. The owners met with our staff. They are contemplating what they're going to do with the building. I actually was over there on Friday, and the previous owner was removing items. I actually went through the building and just took a look at it while she was taking things out. At this point, we can't say, but I know they've been actively marketing it. They've talked to Erica about starting the sidewalk to get the front of that done. So, but other than that, we really don't, there's nothing else I can say. That's all I know.
That's fair. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Okay, moving on to our informational item, this will be Weld County referral on annexation, introduced by our Community Development Director, Jason Bell.
Do you have that?
Yep.
Would you like for me to click through, or
I'll click through.
you'll do it? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Danelle. Thank you so much, Mayor and trustees. I just wanted to bring this proposal before you, just to get your input on it. This is the subject that I'm going to be talking about is a proposed annexation to the town, and a proposed use that could be appropriate in the town, or maybe it would just be better to stay in the county and remain there. So I wanted to get your input just to make sure that I'm giving good direction to this proposed developer. So to the next slide, didn't it? This map here just shows the location of the property in question. You can see on this map the existing town boundaries. So you can see that this property is currently in unincorporated Adams County. It is,
Not Adams.
well, or I'm sorry, Will County, I'm so used to saying Adams.
Before we get that far south.
Yeah, sorry, it's an unincorporated Will. I'm calling it the Ehrlich property, just because that's the name on the property, on the the property ownership. There's no address. It's located north of County Road 32 or Adams, and it is east of County Road 3. It's south of the Maverick solar field. You can kind of see the solar field a little bit to the north there. And it's west of the Mile High Dairy. So on County Road 5, you can sort of see that dairy, sort of that.
Albumana.
Yeah, there you
So
go.
this is 5
There you go.
here, which is the major that you would know, right? 5 and 32.
Yep,
So 32 is dirt to there.
that's right. Thank you so much, Mary. So the property in question, the proposed use for it, and if you want to click to the next slide. The proposed use would be for an RV park, so it'd be very similar to Gopher Gulch. And in order to, the question to us is, would you, Town of Mead, like us to annex to the Town of Mead? As you all know, we have an an IGA, intergovernmental agreement with the county, where within our defined influence boundary, the Town of Mead sort of has the first right of refusal for annexation. And whenever a more urbanized development comes to the town within that boundary, the county will refer them to us to see if we have any desire in annexing or not. The property that I'm talking about is approximately 30 acres in size, and right now it is zoned agricultural. And on our comprehensive plan, if you want to go to the next slide, on our comprehensive plan you can see that right now the land is designated as being appropriate for agricultural uses. So the last time when we did a comprehensive plan, staff and the board and the planning commission thought that any development within this area would probably be most appropriate to be agricultural development.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that a river, or what is that just to the west of it?
It is a ditch.
It's a ditch?
Yep.
Okay, so they wouldn't it's not like it would be like a fishing, like they can fish or anything like that?
I don't
It's a
think so.
ditch.
It's
Okay,
just
I
a
just
ditch.
couldn't quite tell what that was, just
Yeah.
wanted to make sure, okay.
Okay. All right, so if you go to the next slide, Danelle. I'm going to read for you what our comprehensive plan calls agricultural. So uses or developments that are proposed to be agricultural are generally going to be located on the perimeter of our planning influence area, which is the case here. And any uses in those areas are typically going to be appropriate for agricultural operations, low density, single family detached, and other non-urbanized uses that aren't typically ready for development due to a lack of utilities and services. So that's the reason this land was designated on our comp plan for agricultural. And it's also, agricultural designation is intended to act as sort of a transition from the county into the more urbanized town. Okay. So I did, thought about this, spoke with a couple of the other town staff to come up with a list of sort of pros and cons of annexing this. Some of the pros that we came up with is that the use that is being proposed is an allowed use in the county. So if this
It's not?
it is an allowed use. So if they were to develop in the county, they could do that. It's a use by right. So whether we annexed or not, if this development moves forward, it's very likely that it'll become an RV park either way, whether we annex them or not. Some of the pros of annexing them would be the town's ability to control some of the design and some of the mitigation techniques. So for instance, buffering, landscaping standards, lighting standards, architecture. These are things that we would have some control over, whereas if it was in the county, we would obviously not have the final say on that. If we were to annex this property, we would have the ability to require infrastructure be brought to the site, such as water, sewer, trails along that ditch there, and roadway improvements. As Mary pointed out, there's about a half mile of unpaved County Road 32, that we could potentially ask them to make an improvement to. If in the future, I know that the town over the years has contemplated pursuing like a bed tax, a tax on people that stay in hotels or motels or RV parks. If that should ever become implemented into the future, obviously the town would benefit from this.
Just a quick question, we have one, but it's $2 a night.
Oh.
And so the question would be, would we ask the voters to increase that?
Did we try that once before?
We did.
We did.
We did.
And it failed.
It did, but that was back in our infancy, before we understood the beauty of education. But we will be collecting this bed tax from Gopher Gulch. We do collect it on Airbnbs. A lot has changed in the years since we asked that, so it's just something, and I don't mean to step over it. I just wanna be clear that as a statutory town, it has to be like a number, like a number of dollars, not percent.
Yeah.
But we could ask the voters with a, education program, it could become a reasonable source of income for the town. So, that's one of the things that we wanted to throw in the mix if this were to become a reality. That would be our second RV park, so.
And finally, the last pro or advantage that I thought would be important to mention is the more we annex, obviously, the easier it is to annex other properties in the future. So those would be some of the pros. How about the cons? What would be arguments against annexing it? Well, the town would need to provide services, obviously. We'd need to provide police. We'd need to patrol and maintain and repair any roadways that are annexed into the town. Obviously, code enforcement, nuisance complaints we would have to deal with. The use will likely, if this developer moves forward, will likely happen whether they annex to the town or not. So even if they stay in the county, if they're still interested in moving forward, it would remain the RV park, and therefore Mead would be forfeiting some of our control over some of the design and some of the fees and property tax revenues. Another con to annexing this to the town is, RV park is generally something that you'll see more commonly in counties. It's not really an urbanized use. Not that we can't, but it's something that is typically done in the county.
Jason?
Yes,
Trustee Adams has a question. David, go ahead and ask your question.
I'm sorry, I was going to wait till the end of his thing there. I was just going to piggyback on Helen's statement there. That was all, and Trustee Schrantz with the fact that we had a road tax that failed the first time we presented it as well. Doesn't mean we shouldn't do it again. The lodging tax is something I think we definitely need to be looking at as more of these types of things start to come into our purview. So I just wanted to add that to her statement.
Thank you very much.
Great. So really what I'm looking for is your feedback. This is kind of one of those questions that comes to staff where, I think you could make a strong argument either way. Let them stay in the county or annex them to the town. And so I wanted to get the board's input on that because, I'm still learning what your policies are, and I don't want to send these folks in a bad direction. So my recommendation after looking through all the pros and cons is that I think it would make sense for the town to pursue annexation. Some of the reasons why the use is already allowed, whether in the county or in the town. It would give the town the ability to control some of the design and mitigation techniques, buffering, landscaping, lighting, etc. The ability to collect that tax, the ability to expand Mead's boundaries further in the future, and then the ability to require of that developer some public improvements, roadway improvements, water and sewer extensions to the site, trail construction. So anyways, that's just a very brief description. I'm happy to answer any questions for you if you have any, but mainly I was looking for direction from the town on, is this something that you would like for us to get back to the proposed developer and encourage them to annex, or would you just be as happy to have them stay in the county? Thank you so much, appreciate it.
Jason, I have a couple of questions, and you may not have the answers to these questions, but do you have any idea if this park is going to be for permanent RVs or transient? Or both?
You know, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to it. The impression that I had is it was gonna be similar to Gopher Gulch. The gentleman that I was talking to on the phone was comparing this to Gopher Gulch, so I got the impression that it was gonna be for vacationers, and he specifically mentioned absorbing some of the folks that are taking their RVs up into Estes Park and the Rocky Mountain National Park. So I got the impression it was sort of a temporary stay, but we could find out more information.
That would be a question I would want to ask,
Mm-hmm.
if they have any plan for allowing permanent residents.
Yeah, cause if it was permanent, that'd be more like a mobile home park,
That's right.
not an RV park.
You can kind of do it both ways and get away with it.
Yeah, right.
With it. So that's one. Do you have any idea about how many spots this 30 acres would entail?
No, I don't. It's 30 acres in size. I'm trying to remember the Gopher Gulch,
Algorithm?
yeah, if we're,
Yeah, like how many, I was gonna ask, how big is Gopher Gulch in acres, just for a comparison in my head?
yeah, Gopher Gulch is, sorry? Yeah, I was gonna say it's about twice the size, and if I remember correctly, I think they have, thank you, 152, he's good with numbers. So let's just assume that it would be half of that, you know, so let's say 75,
80 spaces?
yeah.
Okay. And what would, besides the bed tax, is there anything else that the town would recognize out of that, revenue-wise?
Well, we would have impact fees. We also, as we have been looking at and implementing, we could consider a GID, a general improvement district, to help maintain like the trails and on-site improvements. But beyond that, sometimes these things generate like a general store or that kind of thing, so there would be some sales tax. But that's generally what we would get out of it, would be the bed tax or,
Right.
yeah.
So I'm also thinking about traffic,
Mm-hmm.
in and out of these places with, without trailers, going through town to get there.
Yeah.
That becomes a little bit of a concern to me, if I weigh that to what the benefits are, when I get back for it, because it's gonna be using up a lot of our roads.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it's going to whether we annex it or not.
Well, you're right, it may, and that would be my other point, would be if I were the developer, why would I wanna annex and have to try to do all these other things when I could get it for free from the county?
Yeah. Yeah, I
What
mean,
do we have to offer them, yes?
yeah.
Well, one of the big things that we had to offer Gopher Gulch was police services. That was a huge reason why they wanted to annex.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, not just that, but, you know, code enforcement is becoming huge. And we're really starting to realize it as these neighborhoods become fully populated, like Sereno or the Highlands. There's a lot of things that need to be dealt with. The county will not provide the police services, so they have to establish their own police force, if you will, like pay into a fund, and it's a lot of trouble. So I would say the big carrot to come to the town is police right off the bat. That, I know that's what it was with Gopher Gulch.
And that's a carrot for them, but an impact to us. So
Well,
that we have
yeah.
to provide that service.
Exactly. And we could look at doing a deep dive into the impact study and look at whether or not there is a disproportionate amount of police, for example, like a Walmart, where you have to have, like the Walmart in Timnath has 2 full-time Timnath officers at that Walmart 24/7. That's a lot of money, so, but, back to why would they want to? The commissioners tend to look favorably when a town wants to annex and what that brings, so. It isn't just what does the applicant wanna do, a lot of times the county can help the decision.
No?
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna bring up police services, and would this eventually, like, one of the things that in my head I'm envisioning is at some point people going from there over to Mead Ponds, and then on to maybe Highland Lake, and we're already having issues up at Highland Lake with trash and fishermen leaving crap around there, and, cause it's not that far of a jump to Mead Ponds if somebody's there with their kids and, oh, hey, there's ponds not too far from here, let's go fishing, and, you know, what is that going to do to police services? And if they're in the county and they're having issues and we can't do anything about it, that seems like that would be a freaking nightmare. I mean, we're already having issues with just Highland Lake, and it's almost, and there's no camping there, it's just people going and fishing, and we're kinda having issues with Highland Lake. I can't even imagine if this was in the county and they're having issues and we're just like, sorry, call the county, we can't do anything about it. I mean, obviously if somebody's, you know, in the middle of a homicide, yeah, sure, they could probably help out, but a lot of these issues are probably not gonna be that severe, and
More nuisances.
yeah, and the counties, if they're not responsive, people are gonna blame us. They're gonna blame us, that why can't the town need to do anything about it? It's not our deal, but they won't care that it's not our deal.
Yeah.
They'll feel like we should step up anyways. Okay, but that's kind of the way that it goes. So I kinda, yeah, that is one of the things that's coming to my mind as a big deal, is the police being able to patrol it and enforce things out there as a big benefit, like you said. I see it being a nightmare the other way. But do you really think that, so when Gopher Gulch came in, they didn't really have to do much in the way of road improvements because Sorrento had already done all the turn lanes and everything. Did they contribute? In my mind, I'm thinking, can we really ask them to improve that road at the cost of how many millions of dollars for a RV park? I feel like what they're gonna get out of it is not gonna offset the potential ask of road improvements on 32. But I'm sure that all fleshes out in the long run, I don't know, but
Yeah.
that just seems like in my head, I'm like, there's no way that
Well,
that's gonna be cost effective.
imagine an RV park on a dirt road. I mean, it really would be limiting, it would limit the desirability. There are a lot of reasons why you would wanna have that improved. I mean, the county could make them improve it, even just if it were in the county. It's not like the county is like, you can do whatever you want.
Right.
They look at things similarly, but not, you know, quite the same way we do, but it's possible they'd have to do a lot of those things. There's
Okay.
just so many things in an RV park, dogs, you know, people bring dogs, you can have severe issues with that, fire pits, enforcing fire bans, there's a number of things that, you know, it could be nuisancey. I could see where you'd say, let the county deal with it, but as you say, they won't, because they're not out here,
Right.
and we're out here,
And
so.
we'll get blamed for it.
Blamed for it or expected to do something about it
Yes.
when we don't have jurisdiction.
Right, yeah.
Do we know that the county supports this?
No, but it is a use by right in the ag zoning. So, my assumption is that as long as they meet all the criteria, just like here, you know, as long as they meet all the criteria, it would be a use by right.
They must generate some pretty healthy fees, because
Hmm.
the cost that Gopher Gulch is incurring, the water line extension that they're doing, the trail that they're building, the wetland mitigation, that's an expensive project. And all I can say is, and I don't know anybody, I know people who have RVs, and I know that it's expensive, but it must generate a lot of money. Because, and generally, people who go in there have a $200,000 RV, they expect a fairly nice place, so.
Is this part of our regional trail system, this at all, this piece of land?
So it's not officially designated on our trails master plan, but I think our argument could be, our comp plan designated this as being most appropriate for agricultural. This is a little bit more rural than agricultural, and therefore, sort of the overall general policies for parks, open space, and trails would apply here.
So could we have a trail from that area down to like, County Road 5 and Adams? I mean, could we ask them to do something like that?
We can ask them to do
Connectability to
anything,
town, yeah.
you know, whether that's gonna be affordable or not, or
Right.
whether it's gonna be to their interest or not, would be my fear with that.
Well, we're doing our master plan, you know, we're gonna do our trails master plan.
Yeah.
So we would look at these opportunities
Right.
and
I
say,
just think that's,
yeah.
every time we have somebody that wants to become a part of our town or community, that we could include some kind of connectability, if that's a
Yeah.
word,
Right.
for trails, mobility. This is the whole thing that we're talking about during, you know, this transportation regional thing.
Right.
You expand something eventually to the ponds, you know, to County Road 5, and if it does trigger anything on 66, you know, I don't know, but it could be, it doesn't matter, and, you know, they would have to do a traffic study, but, I'm all for it, cause I think it's important that we have the inclusion of different, diversity of, I would say, housing slash, you know, puts Mead on the map, it gets people coming into town, you know, and eventually coming downtown to our this place here, and I think it's a nice thing, even though it's probably a mile away, but
Making some trails connections would be
yeah, I think
important, too.
I think it would be important for people, even if they're coming just to sit for a couple of days to explore what Mead is about.
Yeah.
You know, down the street's a great soccer field that, you know, they may wanna go and watch a game for the, you know. So I think that Mead's a good place for somebody to actually come to stay for a couple of days. I know I would,
Yeah. Yeah.
so,
Exactly. I think you know, like I said, he was hoping to get people to stop here for a couple days before they head up
Yeah.
into the park, so.
yeah. David, do you have any questions or comments for Jason? And what are your feeling about going forward with this?
I don't have any comments or questions on the presentation, and I'm all in favor of moving forward with it as well.
Alright, thank you very much. Thanks for your presentation.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your
Yeah.
direction.
Did you get the direction?
Yeah, I think so. Generally, we're supportive, and just make sure that they're paying their fair share.
With Gopher Gulch, we put there's a 30-day limit, right, on how long people can stay there, and so, I mean, we can look at something similar for this, cause I don't think we want this to turn into like the Loveland RV Park where people live there year round, that's.
yeah,
that's
our
definitely
definition of an
not.
RV park is, it's a transient nature, that you can't just
Okay.
take a spot and then leap over to another one and stay there. You have to, it's a maximum, I thought it was less than 30 days, but.
I can't remember what
Yeah,
it was,
But
we
we
put a limit.
do have a limit on it. It's
So.
not considered permanent housing, it's not a mobile home park.
Yeah, so that would be, again, another advantage.
It'll be interesting what they come with,
Cool.
yeah.
All right, well,
Yeah.
we'll get back to them, let them know, and maybe we'll see a application before you hear pretty soon.
Alright,
Thank
thanks,
you,
Jason.
appreciate your help.
Yeah, I think a connection to Mead BOT would actually be a draw would be like a plus for them, to connect to Mead BOT.
Okay.
Come fish, cause you know, that's not Barlow Pond anymore, St. Vrain Pond. There are people there year round at that place, and it's cause they've got the fishing and stuff, so.
Alright, thanks for the discussion. Next is our proclamations for the night. There are two of them. The first is to honor our Mead High School girls lacrosse team for the very first year doing this, becoming our state champions. And I've asked, I know, Trustee Schrantz to read the proclamation for this great asset to our community.
Thank you. Mead High School Girls Lacrosse Team. Whereas Mead High School Girls Lacrosse in its first year as a team earned its first state championship title. Whereas the 2023 Mead Mavericks qualified for the first time in program history for the 4A Colorado State Lacrosse Championship and came home with the title. Whereas on May 19th, 2023, the Mead Mavericks beat the Castle View Sabercats at the 4A CHSAA Girls State Championship at the Peter Barton Lacrosse Stadium in Denver with a score of 13-5. Whereas these students not only brought home a state championship for their school, but served as ambassadors for the town of Mead as they played throughout their season. Whereas Mavericks head coach Katie Coleman has coached her players in building a team, perseverance, hard work, and responsibility. Whereas the Mead Mavericks have worked towards the new horizon of building a new team program and community for those involved. Now therefore, Colleen Whitlow, Mayor, does hereby proclaim June 9th, 2023 as a Mead High School Girls Lacrosse 2023 4A State Championships Day. Given under her hand and sealed the town of Mead, Colorado on the 30th day of May 2023.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the signing of this proclamation?
I have a motion to approve the signing of the proclamation.
I second.
Thank you very much. Roll call, please, Mary.
Trustee Parr,
Yes.
trustee Shranz,
Yes.
trustee Harris,
Yes.
trustee Adams,
Yes.
Mayor Whitlow.
Yes. Thank you very much. Next is our Colorado Bike Month, June 2023, and Colorado Bike to Work Day, June 28th. I've asked trustee Parr to read the proclamation.
Whereas June has been designated as Bike Month, sponsored by the Department of Transportation and celebrated in communities from coast to coast. And whereas Bike to Work Day has had a steady rise in participation since 1995 and is a chance to showcase the many benefits of bicycling and encourage more people to give bicycling a try as an alternative form of transportation. And whereas riding a bike is a viable and environmentally sound form of transportation and an excellent form of recreation. And whereas creating bicycle-friendly communities has been shown to improve citizens' health, well-being, and quality of life, to boost community spirit, to improve traffic safety, and reduce pollution and congestion. Therefore, Colleen Whitlow, Mayor of the town of Mead, Weld County, Colorado, does hereby proclaim June 23rd as Colorado Bike Month and June 28th, 2023 as Bike to Work Day, and encourage all citizens of the town of Mead to recognize the importance of encouraging and supporting the use of bicycles within our community. Given under her hand and seal of the town of Mead of Colorado on the 30th of May, 2023.
Thank you very much. Is there a motion to approve the signing of the proclamation?
I move to approve the signing of this proclamation.
Second.
Second.
All right, thank you. Roll call, please, Mary.
Trustee Shranz,
Yes.
trustee Harris,
Yes.
trustee Adams,
Yes.
trustee Parr,
Yes.
Mayor Whitlow.
Yes. Thank you, motion carries. And congratulations to our lacrosse team, and let's all get out on our bikes on June 28th and ride to work. There you go, bike to work, excuse me. All right, next is, first public comment of the evening. The board welcomes public comment for any item, whether it is on the agenda or not. The board will listen to your comments and take them into consideration. If you desire a conversation, please email the board or town manager or attend the monthly coffee with the mayor. If you wish to speak during this public comment period, please adhere to the town's general guidelines. Please start by stating your full name and address for the record. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to address the board of trustees. If you are representing a group, you will have 5 minutes. If you wish to address the board, please indicate by raising your hand. All right, seeing none, we'll move on to our consent agenda. The consent agenda contains items which are considered routine and approved with one motion and vote. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, please, Mary.
Trustee Adams,
Yes.
trustee Harris,
Yes.
trustee Shranz,
Yes.
trustee Parr,
Yes.
Mayor Whitlow.
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Thank you, staff, for putting all this together. Next is our first reading or building code update. Ordinance number 1036 will be adopted by reference building code updates. The process is set out in the agenda item summary and for our first reading tonight, and if approved, it's set for public hearing at our June 12th meeting. I'll turn the floor over to our Community Development Director, Jason Bradford.
Thank you, Mayor and trustees, thank you so much. And I also want to thank Mr. Tim Maroney and Deputy Chief Webb for being here this evening. They're the true experts. I asked them to attend today so that they can answer any technical questions that you all have about the the code amendment. But before they come up and present to you, I just wanted to give you a sort of a brief outline on what we're doing here tonight and what brought this before you this evening. So for your consideration this evening, what we're considering is the adoption of some new building codes. Specifically, we're looking at adopting the 2021 International Plumbing Code, the 2023 National Electric Code, the 2021 International Energy Conservation Code, or IECC, and the 2021 International Fire Code. And for your reference, generally the way building codes are adopted is a little bit different than we adopt other ordinances here in town, because the state statutes have a requirement that whenever a town or city adopts a code by reference, so in this case we're proposing the adoption of these building codes that have already been drafted. They're not attached to the ordinance, so we're drafting them by reference. The state statutes require that we have 2 meetings before you. The first one, like tonight, is basically an introduction. What are we doing? What are we proposing? And then a second meeting that would be a public hearing. Why are we here this evening? In 2022, the Colorado legislature enacted a legislative act that required all the jurisdictions in the state to adopt the 2021 International Electric Conservation Code, the IECC, and other items whenever we adopt any building codes after July of this year, July of 2023. And I've asked him to come and explain that in greater detail. He's the expert on it. But as some of our building codes, especially our fire code, were starting to get a little bit outdated, we thought, let's get all of those done tonight in order to avoid some of the stricter requirements that the state has placed on municipalities. So anyways, that is the reason we're here tonight. Again, I've asked Tim Maroney, who works with Safe Built, and he's our chief building official here for the town, and also Deputy Chief Jeff Webb with the Fire District, to explain some of the fire code issues and answer any questions and technical questions that you may have on those codes. But before I turn it over to them, I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any for me. Okay, seeing none. Sure. We'll have Chief Webb come up. Okay, thank you.
Good evening. I'm Jeff Webb. I'm the fire marshal for Mountain View Fire. We protect 7 entities throughout the whole district, 3 counties and 4 municipalities. So when we adopt a fire code per state statutes, Title 32 for special districts, we have to write it with enough flexibility that it meets the needs of all the underlying agencies that we cover. And so in our case, we wrote a fire code that has a lot of if-then statements. Our code says if the town has a residential code that has certain features in it, then we require these certain features in the fire code. That way we cover all the different interests, safety design thing, the cost benefit amount that each of the towns or counties has. It is a wide variety. We cover all the way up to Gross Reservoir in the west. We go out through Superior and Dacono, and then all the way up to Mead in the north. So it's a large banana-shaped district with a lot of different interests. The code that we have proposed and that has been modified to go into your documents reflects all the sort of selections that we built into our code that meet the town's desires in terms of meeting with your building codes, meeting with your various fire service features. And so we think we've got it all covered, that's nice and smooth. And if you have any questions on it, we can discuss each feature if you like, or move right on.
Thanks, John. Chris, Amy. David, do you have any questions for Chief Wen?
No, I do not.
Cool.
We assume y'all know what you're doing.
Our job is to make life boring. Because
There you
if
go.
life is boring, it's all working.
That's right, exactly.
Carmen, do you have a question?
I do have a question, and it's, I guess more of a form of an example
Okay.
of something that may has changed, in regards to the fire code associated with the town of Mead.
For instance, solar panels now are mentioned quite conspicuously between the 2018 and 2021 codes. Not necessarily the town of Mead, but in the town of Erie. Resin extraction from plant material, CBD production, was a specialized section that we had to build in the 18 code. In the 21 code, it's actually in there as a whole chapter by itself. So if they're doing CBD or hash oil production, we now have a set of rules we can work with. Similarly, there was an addition in this code set for alcoholic beverage production. So when we have micro distilleries, that's a whole new code set right now. Other things that we put in are specific to the fire service needs. For instance, Mead has a driveway code that says how big driveways can be and how long they are. But the fire code official has something to say about the corners. Because if our engines can't turn up those corners because they're too tight or they're too bound in by trees and bushes, it doesn't help. We have to have to be able to say something about that so that we can adequately protect the town.
All right, good, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Guys, Tim, you're up. You wanna add on that?
Good evening. Your question, what's changed? Here's your current energy code. Here's the 21.
Word.
Have you read it?
Almost every page.
It's good for you. Then you're the guy I go to then.
If you can't sleep at night, give me a call and we can read this.
Yeah.
So, one of the reasons we're doing what we're doing is last year the state created legislation that stated after July 1st, any code a jurisdiction adopts, they have to adopt the 21 energy and the sweep or stretch codes. 21 energy code by itself is more than adequate. The sweep and stretch codes that our governor is proposing has got a whole different degree of difficulty. Solar, for instance, with the stretch and sweep codes, every new structure has to be ready for solar. You have to have a raceway from the attic to the panel. You have to have electrical, and you have to have enough breaker space in your panel. So you also have to abide by electrification. The governor and what's going to be the State Energy Conservation Board is stating no more gas burning appliances. Everything's electric. Except for the Supreme Court ruled you can't do that. So they have to have options. So they're pushing real hard to get strictly electric appliances. Water heaters, furnaces, stoves, fireplaces, everything's electric. Well, if we adopt the stretch and sweep codes that we're trying to stay away from, if you replace your water heater in your home with another gas water heater, you now have to run an electrical circuit to your panel and provide the breaker space for it, even though you may never use it. Same thing with your furnace, same thing with your stove. With EVs, that's the coming trend, electrical vehicles. For every parking space you have in your garage, you have to have a circuit back to the panel with breaker space to put in an EV charger. Now, let's say, for instance, to meet the required parking space in a structure, you have to use your driveway. Guess what? You might have to have EV receptacles in your driveway and the breaker space. So you're replacing your furnace, your water heater. Now you've got to run those new circuits. If you don't have a circuit, you now have to do a service change. So your water heater goes from $3,000 to $10,000. Well-intentioned, in my opinion, that puts an undue hardship on the residents. So the whole thrust here is to get through the state requirements for energy and electric and plumbing with the least amount of impact to Mead. So if we adopt the 21 energy code before July 1st, we do not have to adopt solar, we do not have to adopt EV, we do not have to adopt electrification. Now, everybody's certainly welcome to do that. And, you know, if you want to mitigate environmental impact, great. The idea is to have the least amount of impact to our residents that we can do. So with the legislation that came out last year, after July 1st, anytime a jurisdiction adopts a new code related to building, you now have to adopt the 21 and the sweep codes.
After July 1st.
After July 1st. So we're trying to get the fire code, the plumbing code, electric code, and energy code adopted, which gives us time to breathe before the state requires more and more stringent requirements. So in 25, the state will have the State Energy Conservation Board, and we will not have any choice. It will be another state unfunded mandate. So we're trying to be proactive. We're trying to give the town as much flexibility as possible with the least amount of impact. So the state has already adopted the 21 plumbing code, and they've modified it a little bit. We have a year to adopt that, and that went into effect mid-April. So we've got a year to adopt that. We're gonna get it done sooner.
Any significant changes in that?
Nothing significant, nothing horrendous. And same thing with the electrical, the state is gonna adopt the electric code 23 NEC August 1st. We wanna be ahead of the game, so we've adopted it, so we don't have to do all the state additional requirements. That being said, sometime in August, we will, as state built, we will produce documents for the jurisdiction. And basically it's gonna be a then versus now, the significant changes in the energy, plumbing, electrical codes. It'll be in a format that you can send out to all your contractors, and it's just gonna be the changes that apply to Mead. And we're not gonna go through every change there is, because a lot of it doesn't apply to this town. So we will give all the contractors the ability to sit down and say, going forward, here's what I'll need. And we will not have the comment, nobody told me about that. So we're preparing the town to adopt the codes, give them the tools they need to succeed, and adopt codes that are going to minimize the impact of changing energy codes. That's the big thing right now in the state of Colorado, energy. That's the earth, the moon, and the stars for the state right now. Do you have any questions?
So in that thing that you're gonna put together of what's changed from then to now, should you also maybe be putting in there, hey, by the way, guess what's coming?
Oh, there'll definitely
Like-
be timelines.
So, cause I mean, you said at some point this is going to be state mandated and we're not going to be able to avoid it,
So
right?
we'll, in our document, we'll let
So-
everybody know in 2025, and it's gonna depend too on our legislators, if they have a change of heart. You never know from one year to the next, which direction they're gonna go, but we will let the contractors know this is coming, be prepared. Educate yourself for what's coming.
I can't even fathom, I have a huge main panel and 3 sub panels and I'm out of room. I don't have a single breaker left in that,
What size service do you have in your home?
I don't, that's what I'm thinking, I'm like, if I had to upgrade my main panel to add a breaker for something, like, I don't even know if I could. Like, I'm drawing so much, we have an 83 panel solar array, so don't give me any crap, like, but we use a lot of electricity, but we have a huge solar array on there too, but I can't even fathom how much that would cost if you not only had to upgrade your panel, you had to upgrade the line coming to your house to accommodate, I don't even know if that's possible, like,
So here's.
I don't know, I'm just like, my mind is just like, oh.
I just went through that. I bought an EV, and I have split every breaker I can split to make room for the 50 amp breaker, and I am out of gas.
So here's the conundrum, you brought up a really good point. I did a year as the CBO in Superior, and I was lucky enough, my first day in Superior was the day after the fire.
Oh, lucky
So
you.
it was a great experience.
Yeah.
Here's what Louisville and Superior are going through right now. they're mandated to do solar on their new construction. Sounds good, right?
Yeah.
Helping generate electricity for the grid. Excel's in the position right now, they cannot accept any more electricity from solar into their system. So you pay 30 grand for a solar system, you can't sell back any of your excess electricity to Excel.
Oh my gosh.
Unless you wanna pay to upgrade the wiring from your home to the transformer to the switch. If you'll pay for all that for Excel, they'll accept your additional electricity. And that's only 30 to 40 grand more. So we're trying real hard to get away from some of these situations that are coming up. There's gonna be changes. There's never been a code that's easier or less expensive that I'm aware of.
But, you know, and we've talked about this extensively, because this suggestion is really buying us 2 years. What we're doing is we're beating the July 1st deadline by passing the codes and not passing the sweep. There's a couple things to know. Builders who are building now in Superior, Erie, Berthoud are already following these codes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it kind of puts us at a competitive advantage here, in that it will be a little less expensive, but they may build the same chases, a lot of the stuff, because a lot of these homes are kind of, they have stock plans. But I think the thing that we may see, I don't know, I hope, but we keep hearing about affordability. Everything that he's talking about, can you imagine the electrical panels that are required for hypothetical situations in the future where you may switch to electric is ludicrous. You're talking about a panel that's gigantic, that's expensive and hard to get, and you're not using it. And so it's all based on this hypothetical situation that one day you may do it. So for us to sit here and talk about affordability, we have real competing interests when it comes to environmental impacts of just everything has to be electrified, to the cost of that. And how do we create affordable housing in light of these codes? So that's why we're not quite there yet. Anything we can do to avoid it, we may see a different change of heart here in the next 2 years. I say this because I'm eternally optimistic about that. But just, that's the difference. One's based on potential, what we have, but you're not buying the bigger panel. The other places, it's based on potential, but you have to buy the big panels. You have to wire for it. That running a conduit out to your driveway for a receptacle in the driveway. I mean, you're talking about a lot of money in addition to the cost of a new home.
Well, I could certainly understand some of that with new build. That you can work into a new build. Making it retroactive to existing housing is the punch.
Right.
That's the
Yeah.
thing that
So here's just a really small example. Let's say you wanna change your fireplace to a gas fireplace. You no longer wanna burn wood, you wanna do a gas insert. Pretty simple, right? Run your gas line, pretty simple. Well, except now you've gotta run a circuit from your fireplace to the panel and provide a separate circuit for that.
it doesn't make sense. I mean, you're replacing a fuel that causes climate change issues with electricity that you're slowly gonna start running out of, because everybody in the world is gonna be using electricity for everything. And you can only generate X number of kilowatts of electricity, and then what?
And then the other side is those of us that are that old, not most of you folks, but we remember the 70s and 80s when we went all electric. That was the answer. Electric heat was the answer.
Yeah.
Tell people in the 70s and 80s started getting $400, $500, $600 electric bills.
Yeah.
And it's gonna be more now. If you go to all electric, and electric is the answer to everything. What are you gonna do with the couple that's 70 or 80 years old on a fixed income, and all of a sudden their power bill goes from $150 to $400? That's an incredible hardship on
It
them.
is.
Yeah,
It
we
is.
switched, we put in an electric furnace at one point. We hated that thing. We ended up taking it out and putting back in gas.
So the big push right now is to heat pumps. Everyone wants to go to a heat pump. And yes, in most cases, it's a better answer. Unless we get into a bizarre situation in Colorado, like it goes below 20 above. Heat pumps don't work so good below 20 above. Heat pumps don't work so good over 90 above. So they've got their use, they've got their parameters, but right now the technology is not there where they're cost effective below 20 above. And we see a fair amount of that in Colorado.
Uh-huh.
So your heat pump doesn't give you the heat you need, guess what you use? Electric baseboard heating.
Mm-hmm.
What is the least efficient method of heating there is?
Baseboard heating.
Baseboard heating. So, the whole thrust behind what the town is trying to do is to minimize the impact on our citizens for the coming legislation. And by doing that, we'll adopt the energy code, the electric code, the plumbing code, and the fire code.
Sweet.
Without the additional sweep, without the EV, without the solar, without the electrification.
But like you and Helen said, that's a stopgap, because
It is.
that's just, that's a 2-year
Potentially
savings.
coming anyways. That's crazy.
You have to prepare,
Wow.
The
in 2 years
governor,
from now, we're putting even that many more senior citizens into the mix.
it's our hope, touch wood, it's our hope that the legislation will see what's going on and see what's actually happening and realize there's probably a better way of doing it than the road we're going down right now.
Okay.
So we're hoping cooler heads prevail and we come to a better solution by 24, 25, or enough communities in Colorado just say, no, no. While it may be great for Aspen and it may be great for Boulder, it's not great for smaller communities. So that's why we're here today.
So your message is that we need to pass this before July 1st to avoid getting trapped in the sweep.
So the state has already adopted the 21 plumbing code, and they're about to adopt the 23 electric code. By state statute, we have 1 year to comply with that. If we don't adopt these till after July 1st, then we have to adopt all this stuff together. And that's gonna have a much greater impact on our community.
And then we as an organization still need to be looking out 2 years from now, and I mean, I'm optimistic that things will change too, but that little thing on my shoulder says, well, it ain't gonna happen. Somebody out there.
Talk to your legislators and,
Yeah.
you know, it's
Well,
challenging
they need to
times.
take it out of the theoretical into the practical. It sounds good on paper, but it's just not practical.
So they're gonna tell you, if you go all electric, Excel, Boulder County, several other individuals did studies on what it would cost to follow the energy code, the sweep and the stretch codes. On a new home, that's anywhere from $40,000 to $60,000. And that's great,
And
it's
that's
all,
in building it, that's not like yearly maintenance of what you're
No,
paying,
no,
that's
no.
to build it
that's
will cost
to
40 to
include it
60,000
on a new
extra.
build.
Okay, alright,
So, and that's great, it's only $60,000, and that works right well into affordability, right?
right.
Increase the cost of a new structure 10%.
We do get the use tax on it though.
So there is that, but the payback is approximately 30 years.
Yeah.
And while that's great, you presume nothing will go wrong in 30 years. Show of hands, has anybody had to replace water heater or furnace within 30 years?
2 or 3 times.
Now, there are certain grants and there are certain rebates that are available if you meet certain thresholds, but they're all predicated on you do everything, you put it all in, you get it tested, you get it certified, then you apply for the grants. And we have found out so far, 2 of the biggest grants that are out there, they're done, they ran out of money. So when you're thinking you're gonna do this $40,000 in grants, you're under the presumption all that money will still be there in a year or 2 waiting for you.
I just went through that with United Fire, because they give a rebate for wiring it. They didn't tell you what the cost of 6-gauge wire was, geez, Pete Louise.
So in your case, you're gonna have to step up to a 325 amp service, and that will probably only cost you about $8,000. Piece of cake.
Yeah.
325 amp service because of the EV?
Pardon me?
No,
Because
no,
of
no,
EV?
for her.
Oh, we actually added, when we did our last sub panel, we actually added an EV, so I actually have one plug for an EV already in my panel,
So a lot of people pursuing this will look and say, well, I need 2 circuits for each EV charger. 2 circuits for a stove, 2 circuits for a dryer, 2 circuits for a furnace, 2 circuits for a water heater. So now I have to have an additional 12 circuits in my panel, which means your standard 32 circuit residential doesn't work. Now you have to go to a large quasi-commercial panel, which is 4 feet high by 24 inches wide, with a larger meter housing, so now you're occupying more space on the exterior of your home, and just the equipment alone can be anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000, just for the pieces and parts.
Oh, yeah.
Before you talk about labor and permits, and who knows, you may never use those breaker spaces ever.
Well, you're just full of good news, aren't you?
I was gonna say, could you say something positive, please?
Positive is this
I
town
will.
this town is forward thinking, and we're looking to do what's gonna be the least impactful for our residents.
And I think that's the right thing to do, clearly, but like I said, it's just a stopgap measure at this point. We still have stuff ahead of us that we have to deal with.
Okay. I move to adopt ordinance number 1036. Can I just go? I'm just gonna ask David if he has any questions. Oh, if David, oh, does David have?
David, do you have any questions or comments for the great Tim?
Sorry.
Yeah, no, I do not at this time. Great presentation.
Shocking. I thought that's just shocking. Go ahead,
Yes.
Trish. Yeah, all right. I move to adopt ordinance number 1036, an ordinance of the town of Mead, Colorado, amending certain provisions of Article 2, Article 2, says Article 2 again. I'm guessing that's supposed to be Article 3. Provisions of Article 2, Article 3, Article 4, no, that's 6. Article 7, Article 11, and Article 12, I think, of Chapter 18 of the Mead Municipal Code concerning building and fire code regulations, adopting by reference respectively in the International Plumbing Code 2021 edition, the International Energy Conservation Code 2021 edition, both promulgated by the International Code Council, the National Electric Code, NFPA 70 2023 edition, promulgated by the National Fire Protection Association, Inc., and as adopted by the state of Colorado, and the International Fire Code 2021 edition, also promulgated by the International Code Council on first reading. I further move to set second reading and public hearing on the ordinance for June 12th, 2023 at 6 p.m. at Town Hall with a request of the town clerk provide language in the published notices of the hearing to advise the public that the June 12th regular meeting will be held as a remote meeting in accordance with the town's remote participation and remote meeting policy. And I further move to ratify all past actions of town staff / town clerk to finalize and provide timely notice of the public hearing in accordance with the applicable requirements of state law.
Second.
Roll call, please, Mary.
Trustee Harris.
Yes.
Trustee Parr.
Yes.
Trustee Schranz.
Yes.
Trustee Adams.
Yes.
Mayor Whitlow.
Yes. Thank you very much. Motion carries. Thank you, Chief Webb and Mr. Timaroni, for your shocking testimony tonight. So thank you very much. Thank you for your time. And thank you for staff for putting all this together for us. And we will revisit this on June 12th. All right, next is our public hearing for parking regulations. Item 10B is a public hearing regarding parking regulations. We will hear from staff, then the public will be given an opportunity to comment before the board considers this item. The time now is 7:10, and I will open the public hearing. Again, we will hear from a Community Development Director, Jason Bradford. Hi.
Hi, Mayor, thank you, I appreciate it. Thank you to the mayor, trustees. Yes, so the item before you, this evening that I'll be presenting.
Excuse me a second.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I believe Town Attorney Joshua Meyer may have a comment.
Mr. Myers, you have your hand up. Would you like to speak?
Are y'all able to hear me?
Yes.
I'm sorry. We're having that issue again, where everyone's cutting out, that's actually there with you.
Sorry about that. We're in this confined area while our boardroom is being remodeled, so I apologize for the glitch in with our whole technical system is going. So We'll do a better job for you.
No worries. It was just more of a making sure that we are all able to catch everything that's occurring. Sorry about that. Thank you.
No worries, if we want to address him, we need to make sure he can hear us before we ask him anything.
All right, thank you so much. And Danelle's pulling up my, thank you, Danelle. Okay. So the presentation that I have for you now is on a proposed amendment to our parking regulations in the land use code. Thank you, Danelle. So a brief overview, why is staff considering and proposing to you amendments to the parking regulations? During my time here, a little more than a year and a half now, planning staff has met with several prospective developers who've expressed an interest in developing multifamily and single-family attached housing projects here in the town of Mead. Some of those developments would be the Walker Farms development, in Mead Crossing, which is that development, that subdivision with Quick Trip there. There's several locations there. The waterfront development has single-family attached and multifamily components to it. Obviously, the Turion project is going to have quite a bit of that. That proposed Highland Town development has elements of multifamily and single-family attached, and I'm sure there are others as well. Most of these prospective multifamily and single-family attached developers have expressed to staff some concerns about the existing parking regulations. And so after taking a look at our existing regulations, staff also felt that there were some problematic elements of our code, and so it's probably due for some revisions. The existing parking regulations could be potentially problematic and place Mead at a disadvantage in the marketplace when it comes to constraining developers the opportunity to provide some of the more affordable and higher density housing options, that missing middle housing options that all communities are striving to be able to provide for future residents. Okay, next slide. I included several spreadsheets in your packet, so I'm not going to dwell on this slide, but just to show you that in your packet I included a list of what I'm considering our peer communities, right? Other communities that are in Weld County, or other communities that are adjacent to us, or other communities that I felt were sort of peer communities with me. And we as staff took a look at what do their parking regulations say, and then compared those with Mead's. Okay, so I'm going to just talk briefly about what were some of the elements of our parking code that staff identified, or that prospective developers identified to staff, saying that these regulations in particular were problematic. So the first one is the number of parking spaces that are required, or the ratio of parking spaces. So when you're talking about multifamily or single family attached, you can talk about parking spaces per unit, or you can talk about parking spaces per bedroom. And what we found is that most of the peer communities generally are going to be talking, when it comes to multifamily and single family attached, they're going to be talking about the number of bedrooms, because obviously the more number of bedrooms you have, the more opportunities for roommates or adult folks with cars, and we need to accommodate those cars. For the town of Mead, for our multifamily parking regulations, it required that, some of the parking spaces would be enclosed in the garage, which is very unusual when we compare, our regulations with other communities. Requiring enclosed parking for multifamilies is really, unique for Mead and obviously extremely expensive and therefore puts us at a little bit of a market disadvantage if we're wanting to promote those kinds of housing projects. The existing code also prohibited the use of tandem parking, and that's a parking scheme where, you know, one car is parked behind another. Some of the parking requirements were kind of difficult to understand. What exactly was the code trying to accomplish? For instance, when you look at the existing code for multifamily, that does require the enclosed parking requirement. Is that for all of the parking spaces for multifamily have to be enclosed? It wasn't really clear in the code. And then finally, another issue that we wanted to address in the amendment was a requirement for single-family attached parking for any projects that included units with 3 bedrooms or more. It provided staff with the ability or the option of requiring a parking study of the developer. None of the developers out there are really gonna have an issue with providing that study, but it just adds an element of added time, added cost, uncertainty. Most developers will tell you that we'd rather just know what the regulations are rather than providing a study and negotiating back and forth with staff. Just tell us what the requirements are and we'll do it. In addition to those problematic regulations that were identified to staff from prospective developers, in looking at our code, staff also found a few other issues that we thought, hey, if we are gonna do a code amendment, let's address some of these other issues as well. Some of those included guest parking. Guest parking wasn't really addressed very clearly in our code, so we thought let's add that. Single-family detached parking standards, so that's your typical house, your single-family detached home. Our code in Mead requires that each house provides 2 parking spaces, and both of those parking spaces have to be enclosed. So, you know, our suggestion is that maybe we look at that. Another thing that I and a couple other planners have noticed over the last few years is more and more multifamily apartment managers are adding a parking fee, an additional parking fee to your rent. So they might say, you know, every parking space has an additional $50 attached to it. Or if you want more than one space, you have to have a certain fee. One of the things that we're finding is a lot of the residents of those multifamily projects where that is a requirement are parking in surrounding neighborhoods and walking, which just adds a burden onto the surrounding neighborhoods, right? Okay, so those were the issues that we wanted to address with this code amendment. Thank you, Dana. In coming up with the proposed regulations, what did staff do? We looked at best practices. So we looked at various planning resources. There are a lot of journals, a lot of articles, a lot of studies out there that we took a look at. We met and discussed parking with prospective multifamily and single-family developers. If you remember back in March, I brought in 4 experts. All of them have a lot of experience in building this kind of housing project, and so they provided some expertise as well as other developers that I just happened to talk to. We compared Mead's regulations with our peer communities, took a look at where are we similar, where are we different. And then also just considered experiences and observations. I just had a lot of experience with the town of Brighton and with the requiring of the parking fees, and I know that that caused a lot of problems in every single project, so. Let's go to the next slide now. So here I included this spreadsheet in your packet as well. It's probably gonna be hard to see from where you're sitting here, but basically what I did is in your packet I included what are Mead's existing standards today, what is in your code today, versus what are some of the changes that staff is proposing that you adopt. And so if you have any specific questions about that, I'd be happy to answer them. Okay, so let me just briefly go through what were some of the changes that we made. So again, the multifamily, this is your apartments, these are your, I guess apartments would be, the multifamily housing units. So right now our code says that you'll have one enclosed space per bedroom, up to 2 per unit. So what are some of the, why is this problematic? This ratio does not account for the diversity of different types of units that are being offered. There's studio and efficiency apartments that technically don't have a bedroom. And then a lot of apartment complexes might have 3 or 4 bedroom units. And so this existing code really doesn't address that diversity of bedrooms that can be constructed. And then the requirement to enclose parking for apartment developments is very unique among peer communities. I think puts the town of Mead at a financial market disadvantage. Requiring enclosed parking for multifamily is something that, you know, I don't have much experience seeing. None of the developers have ever seen that before. So just, I think, makes us very unique among our peer communities. And it's obviously very cost prohibitive, puts it at a set of disadvantage. So what is the proposed code amendment? Okay, so the proposed code amendment for multifamily, it has an increasing parking ratio based upon the increasing number of bedrooms. So as your bedroom count goes up for that unit, so does your parking requirement. And the other thing is that the amendment proposes that the developer provide 1 parking space for every 5 dwelling units for guest parking. So in addition to the parking that they need to provide for the number of bedrooms and in each unit, they also need to provide a certain amount of parking for guests, which is missing from our existing code. The code also puts a limit on the imposition of those additional fees that I was talking about, where apartment managers might charge an additional fee for parking. It does, the way the amendment is drafted, it does allow for managers to do that if they want to. In some ways, we want to let the market kind of work these things out on their own. We don't want to be too heavy-handed, but the proposal before you says that you, at the very least, you as the apartment manager have to provide at least 1 free parking space per unit. So, you know, you can't charge for all of the parking spaces. So that is the proposal before you.
I don't like that, Jason.
Okay.
I have to tell you right now, I don't like that.
Okay.
If they have a 2-bedroom unit and they have to provide 2 parking spaces, or a 3-bedroom unit and they have to provide 3 parking spaces, those should be part of it.
Okay.
I think that they shouldn't have to pay any additional. If they're already paying for a 3-bedroom unit, they should get 3 parking spaces with that 3-bedroom unit.
Okay, well, and that's great, that's why I'm here. So this is my proposal to you, but
I
that
know.
doesn't mean that we can't change it, so I
And I'm just
appreciate that.
throwing that out there right now.
Okay.
I don't think they should be able, I get that they can charge for like, additional beyond the required ones, like, I don't know, if somebody wants to buy a 4th, or like, say they want 4 roommates in a house and they want a 4th, fine, pay, or an enclosed, I get that. But I don't think somebody should have to pay, if they're already paying for a 3-bedroom unit, they should get 3 parking spaces.
Okay, fair enough.
In my opinion.
They shouldn't have to pay for, if you have 3 bedrooms, you should get 3 spots.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Well, we can make that change if that's the consensus of the board then.
Okay, just throwing that out there. Will.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Let's go to single-family attached parking, okay? Our existing, regulations say this, that 2 parking spaces are required per unit, and a minimum of 1 of those, so at least 50% of those have to be enclosed.
How do you define single family attached?
So, single-family attached is, housing that's attached, so it can be, vertical or horizontal, but generally they have their own entrance. So each unit has its own entrance from the outside to the
Like an
inside.
duplex?
Right.
Duplex, triplex,
Right.
or even quadplexes.
Townhomes,
Townhomes.
patio homes. Multifamily generally means that you have one entrance to a building, and then each unit has an entrance from the inside of the
Okay.
building. Yeah. What else does the existing code say? Requires 1 guest space per 3 units. And then this is where, we have a regulation stating that staff can require a parking study for projects that have 3-bedroom units or larger, 4-bedroom units, et cetera. Okay, why are these problematic? The parking study is unique among our peer communities, so we're the only one in the peer communities that can require that. And again, like I said, to a developer, that just adds uncertainty to the process. They would rather us just tell them what they have to do than go through an additional study, have to prepare the study, and then wait to hear what staff says about it, so. And then the requiring of enclosed parking for single-family attached, is also unique among our peer communities, and again, adds an additional cost. And, the guest parking ratio, well, guest parking is definitely a best practice. And some of our peer communities do require, guest parking. We were on the high end of that, so what is the proposed amendment? The proposed amendment before you is that we increased the parking ratios again, just like we did for multifamily. As the number of bedroom units gets higher, so does our parking requirement. And staff is, suggesting that we amend our code to say guest parking would be 1 per 5, 1 parking unit for every 5 dwelling units rather than 3, so that's a little bit of a lower requirement that we're suggesting. It's a little bit more in line with our peer communities. It also, the amendment removes that potential for, requiring an additional parking study, and instead just opting for the number of units increasing with bedroom counts. And also, the amendment clarifies that the bicycle parking requirement for multifamily would also be applied to single-family attached. In our existing code, that was unclear. Next slide. Single-family detached, again, this is, staff's recommendation based on, literature and, experience and some of the comments from developers. Our existing code requires 2 enclosed parking spaces per unit. That is actually pretty typical, with our peer communities. However, my comment to, you, the board of trustees, is that requiring both parking spaces to be enclosed does, limit some of the opportunities for alternative single-family detached products that we're starting to see more and more of. So, what is the proposed amendment? The proposed amendment is that we reduce that requirement for both parking spaces to be enclosed to just requiring it for 1 parking space, and allows, therefore, developers to come to you with other proposed single-family detached products that might only have a 1-car garage, let's say. And then, it doesn't require that, just gives developers that option. Next slide. And then ADUs, accessory dwelling units. Our existing code requires 1 parking space per bedroom, up to 2 per unit, so a maximum of 2. 100% of those parking spaces can be met by spaces in garages, driveways, or on the street. So the proposed amendment that staff is bringing to you is to make this a little bit more consistent with single-family detached, instead of requiring one space per bedroom, just require 2 parking spaces per unit. And then we're suggesting that you reduce the ability to satisfy that requirement, with on-street parking by saying, let's only allow 50% of that 2 spaces to be satisfied with on-street parking. I think we've seen in the last legislative session, more and more states are pushing communities to accept ADUs as a use by right. And so as that becomes more and more likely, what staff wants to do is, one, ensure that those ADUs, as they become more and more common or even required, that we have adequate parking. And 2, that parking is shared, it's not borne entirely by the on-street parking by the neighborhood, right? The property that has the ADU has to bear some of that responsibility for providing parking. Okay, next slide. Finally, tandem. The existing code prohibits tandem parking except with a 3-car garage.
How do you define tandem?
So tandem parking is a parking scenario in which a vehicle is parked behind another vehicle, and the only way that the vehicle in front can get out is for that second car to move. Right, so let's say you have a 1-car garage, 1 car is in the garage, the other is in the driveway. In order for that car in the garage to move out, the one in the driveway has to leave.
But I have a 3-car garage and 4 cars.
And that's great.
No, it's not, it's got a tandem behind one of them.
Well, so our existing code, only allow that scenario with a 3-car garage. Or I think the intent was or bigger, right? And so the proposal before you is just to expand that, ability to utilize tandem parking, to include, adjacent driveways, so, to allow, in those scenarios where we do allow tandem parking, to allow that to happen on the driveway. Okay. I've been talking a long time because I really wanted to make sure you all understood what our existing code is and what the proposal is, and I'm sure we're gonna have a lot of discussion. So I'm gonna go through this review criteria really quickly, because it's already in your packets. In doing a amendment to our code, we refer to section 16.3.160, and we have those 4 criteria. At least one of those criteria needs to be fulfilled in order to amend the code. Staff believes that 2 of the criteria have been met. Criteria number 3 and criteria number 4. Let's go to the next slide. Criteria number 3 is to accommodate innovations in land use and development practices that were not contemplated at the adoption of the code. So, prospective developers have expressed concerns with Mead's existing parking regulations. Staff compared Mead's regulations with peer communities. Staff verified that many of the regulations were out of alignment with peer communities or best practices. And therefore, in order to ensure that Mead remains competitive and an attractive place to develop, we are suggesting the code be modernized and clarified. Let's go to the next slide. Criteria number 4. To further the implementation and goals of the objectives of the town's comprehensive plan. So staff believes that the amendment before you addresses several of the policies and strategies of the comprehensive plan, especially the goals for a diverse economy and friendly neighborhoods. All this is in your code, so I'm gonna jump over this. Or it's in your packet, I'm sorry. So therefore, staff recommendation is that the proposed amendment will remove some of the existing regulatory barriers that are currently existing in the existing single-family attached or multifamily housing code as it relates to parking. And by making some of these amendments, we will help to encourage a variety of housing products and projects and options, for people of all ages, stages of life, income. So staff recommends approval of the proposed parking code amendment or any modifications to that you think is reasonable. I will stop my presentation and pause for any questions if you have any for me.
Okay, we'll ask the public first, and then we'll ask the trustees for questions to comments to Jason. Is there anyone in the public that would like to speak on this matter? Would request please adhere to our public hearing guidelines for this evening. If you are here with us virtually, please indicate by raising your hand and start by stating your name and address for the record. Is there anybody with us that would like to speak for this public hearing tonight? Okay, seeing none. David, I'll go with you. Do you have any comments or questions?
The only comment that I wanted to ask Jason was real quick, for obviously anything that's already been built to this date, if this were to pass, all those types of units that are already been established would be grandfathered into this?
Yes, that's true. Barring any major changes to an existing project, you're absolutely right. Whatever parking was provided in an approved plan in the past will remain in place. This code amendment would only apply to new projects after the adoption of this code, should you adopt it.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, David. Herman?
You want to sit down, Jason?
That's okay, I'll stand. Keeps me sharp.
I have a few questions, issues, and concerns as well. First of all, what I'd like to do is to separate out, for my own benefit, parking regulations for multifamily, single-family attached on one side, and then housing subdivisions and on the other side, so that it stays clear in my mind.
Okay.
So I'll address first of all the multifamily SFA type of structures.
Okay.
I'm trying to understand what the goal is here. I know development is coming in and saying we're having a hard time dealing with the existing parking regulations, and fine. And we probably do need to update them. But what is the goal that we're trying to accomplish for multifamily? Is it that we're trying to provide more parking spaces available for people, less parking spaces? Is the developer saying, I want less because I want more density in my buildings? I'm trying to understand what that goal is, because I think I understand it, and if so, I think I have some other potential solutions that might accommodate both. But I need to hear from you what you think the goal of this changes are.
Yeah, sure, thank you for that. It's a complicated answer, so I'm gonna try, I have a tendency to ramble on, so let me try to keep it short and concise. I think the biggest thing that staff is trying to accomplish is remove that requirement for multifamily and single-family attached products to be required to provide a garage. I think that's the biggest thing. Every developer is saying, that I'm hearing from, is saying, we're not gonna develop in Mead if that's a requirement. We simply cannot do it. It's not a requirement anywhere else.
I don't understand that, because the apartments in Firestone all have garages. All the apartments they've just built on 119 and Longmont all have garages. So I'm not understanding why developers are saying we don't do that, because they do that.
Well, and I think they provide garages at a premium, right? They might charge a little extra for it, or it's a amenity, or it might be like for luxury apartments. But for most apartment complexes, they don't provide all of the parking spaces in an enclosure. It might be offered as an option.
That I understand, and I'm okay with that.
Yep.
Yeah, but development does build apartment complexes with enclosed garages.
Yeah.
Okay. How they market it and how they sell it is not my issue, but it is a parking availability.
Yeah.
I do agree with the other trustees that, if you're going to buy a 3-bedroom, you get 3 garages, you get 3 spaces, period.
Mm.
There's not that.
And no charging an additional fee for parking.
Right. The other thing you didn't mention, and I know we had talked about it before, was in this space for parking, on this piece of property that has all this building on it, we didn't mention disabled parking and how many spaces. Is there a ratio for how many disabled spaces have to be for X number of apartments? And in light of the previous conversation, EV parking, are we gonna provide, is that a requirement that the developer provide X number of spaces with charging stations already built in and available? And if I do that, is it taking away from other parking spaces?
Those are great comments, all of them, and all of those things were considered. So let me answer the ADA handicap accessible. That is, the ratio for that is already laid out in, the building code. And so I've forgotten what the ratio is. It depends on how big the parking lot is, that ratio kind of changes. So the staff did not want to complicate things by requiring more or less than what the building code already requires. So these parking spaces, if 100 parking spaces are required for a project, whatever ratio of those are required to be handicapped would still be handicap accessible. So that would not change. The EV, that was a discussion item that came up in our work session. My professional opinion is whenever we as planners or a town can avoid requiring something of the market, I always defer to the market knows better than we do usually, right? So why require something unless we really feel strongly about it that we really want to encourage EV parking? Why put that as part of our code? Let the market determine what's appropriate. Maybe today, a 5% ratio would make sense. Maybe 5 years from now, 20 would make more sense, right? So my preference is always to remain mute on subjects where we don't need to get involved. And so that's the approach that I took here. I'm happy to amend the code in any way that you think is more appropriate, but my recommendation is let's let the market.
And I tend to agree with that. My concern is does that take away from these other required parking amendments? So if you're giving me a ratio of X number of parking spaces per bedrooms or whatever, I mean, I'm sure the developer is going to map it all out on his handy dandy chart that says here's all these little parking places. And now whether it's the town of Mead and or the state or the feds coming in and saying you have to have 50 EV stations, and the developer says, okay, fine, put 50 here, we're now 50 less over here. So now I can't meet your code anymore. I can't provide the spaces because somebody took the 50 away from me.
Well, I think the intent of this code is that an EV parking space would be considered a parking space.
Okay, that would be interesting.
Yeah. So,
because I'm like you, it's not my business, I guess, how they manage that, but if I got a family with 3 EVs, which is conceivable, do they each get an EV slot? And she doesn't because she came in too late. Sorry.
Well, let me, I wanna clarify something. Back to your original question. What are we trying to do here? In my opinion, we are trying to level the playing field so that we can be competitive for multifamily. When we're talking about multifamily, we don't have any multifamily of any substance in the town of Mead. We've identified one of the barriers to entry is our parking regulations. So what Jason's attempting to do is create an even playing field with Firestone, Erie, Berthoud, so that all these things are great, but if we burden our regulations with so many things, we won't be a player. So you're looking at it, and I don't mean this to be, I'm just saying, as we look at this, it's market driven. All those nice apartments that have really nice covered parking, that was a developer who said, this is the market I wanna be in. I wanna get $1,800 for a 2-bedroom unit. In order to get it, I have to provide this. What we're not precluding, they can make the whole thing EV if they want to. We're not precluding, covered parking, but what we're trying to come up with is a framework that if someone wants to provide a more affordable product for Mead, we could at least get it in the gate and not have it negated by our parking regulations. That's what our goal is here, is to try to level the playing field.
And I appreciate that, but, and let me see if I can be frank about this, there's other sides of that coin. I mean, getting into, allowing development to come into the playing field, that's one thing. But once they're on the field, how they play the game is another thing, and that affects the town. Because now, if these parkings and these cars are starting to be spread out across neighborhoods and stuff because there isn't enough spaces, or they're charging for the spaces, or whatever the reason is, that begins to affect the town. So yeah, now they're in the game, but they're not playing by any set of rules inside that, on that field. All I'm trying to do, and the reason I go there is because I see it in subdivisions, my own particular one, right? I have a subdivision of every house there has at least a 2-car garage, okay? And there's cars in the garage, cars on the driveway, 2 cars on the street. Every other house. So you go down Homestead and you can't get through. There's no 2 ways that 2 cars can get through because there's so much parking on the street. The reason you're doing that is because all these little children are now big children. All these little children now have cars. Junior has a car, Sally has a car, Mom has a car, Dad has a car, and Grandma's coming to visit and she brings a car. That's a concern to me, okay? Not whether or not these people can build a multi-story building and make lots of money because they only sell X number of spaces. That's the only reason I'm going there. I'm not saying that we shouldn't play in the game. I'm just saying, I think you need to look 2-3 years down the road when that complex is built and all these cars are sitting there. It's a classic example in Firestone. You go down there, go down that road, and there are cars from the frontage road all the way in.
Yeah, let's remember, that was still built in the county.
And
That had no rules to
but
it.
it can happen
Yeah.
here too, Chris.
I understand
That's
that,
the
but
point I'm trying to say.
we keep using Gateway as an example, but we need to remember the county said, do whatever you want.
Yeah, and I highlighted that particular project at the work session, so remember that, that parking ratio that they had there was 1.59, parking spaces per unit. That's really low. And, I also confirmed with those developers that they had that additional parking fee. So a lot of those folks, it's not that they can't find spaces, they're parking in the neighborhood to avoid that fee.
Yeah, and I understand that, and I understand the county thing too, but to me, it's not respective of just the county. It can happen anywhere. And that's what I think we need to kind of look at, and if you can look down the road enough and say, how can we circumvent that from happening? Then we're doing the right thing for everybody. We're doing it for the developer, we're doing it for the community as well. Okay, and that's where I want to go, is to look down the road and say, how can we massage this to satisfy the parties?
Yep.
Okay? And I think you're on the right track as far as what things are being done. I think there's some fine tuning that needs to happen in there. I think from a building standpoint, I think development has the ability to increase their number of parking spaces. Maybe you don't do it on a flat surface, maybe you bring a second level. Maybe you build a second structure on the parking. Not a whole parking complex or garage, but you have a row of parking spaces and then you put a second level on top of that. I don't know, but there are other manufacturing and building kinds of things that they may be able to do to accommodate more parking spaces without using as much geography. I know other countries do that because they don't have the geography, so they have nowhere to go but up. And I don't know if that's even a conceivable thing, it's just an idea that just flew, okay? So that's my issues and concerns about multifamily. As far as homes in subdivisions and things of that nature, we need to work these parking regulations in with covenants and HOA rules. Because we start fighting the city against HOAs, And we tried to create a different set of issues there. So if we need to do, that's why I asked about the tandem, right? Because there are a lot of cars that are a lot of houses that have tandem parking.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not gonna change that,
Right.
okay?
And these regulations should not change that.
Yes.
This should make it easier to
That
obtain.
would
So we need to do more of that, and we need to find ways to get these cars off the streets. Unless in the future we wanna make streets even wider yet, because frankly, and Chris, I think you can attest to this, you get cars on both sides, and it's very difficult to get two cars to pass. One of us has to move over, let the other guy go before we can go, because it's just crowded with cars. And it seems to be, and I've been in that neighborhood 12 years, it's just getting worse every year. And I really do believe it's because families are growing up, so there's just more cars in the family. And you can't take that away, right? So mom and dad has been taking Junior to the soccer field for 10 years, now it's time for Junior to get himself to the soccer field.
Yeah.
And I'm all right with that, but, so I think what we're doing is the right things. I'm not convinced yet that we've done enough, I guess, is where I'm at.
Okay.
I think we're on the right trail. To your point, yeah, I want to do this, but I also don't wanna create a problem on the other side of that.
Okay.
Fence.
So what changes are you thinking we?
Well, I think we need to sit down with developers, especially for multifamily, and say, what can you do here? Because it sounds like, and I may be dead wrong, it just sounds like I only as a developer wanna create X number of spaces because the rest of this acreage I wanna build. So it's a density issue, and we have it everywhere you go. So, they're gonna make spaces as small as they can and try to cram as much in there because they don't wanna use the geography for parking.
Right.
And that's why they're pushing back on amendments and codes and stuff like that, because it's too restrictive, right?
Yeah.
So I think the solution has to be a combination of us working with development to say, part of it's our problem, we can amend code, but that's not gonna fix your problem. What are you gonna do on your side to help alleviate some of these issues and concerns?
Well, and so, staff did meet with several developers to sort of get a sense of what they're feeling.
Right.
And so as planners, we're always trying to balance the needs of the community, the needs of the town, to make sure that we're ensuring adequate parking, while at the same time also wanting to make sure that we're remaining competitive. If our parking regulations get too high or too restrictive, most developers are just gonna go down the road and build somewhere else. And so that's the balance that this code amendment is hoping to, thread that needle.
And I appreciate that. I honestly do, and I know right where you're at and what you're trying to get done, and I totally appreciate what staff does in regards to that. It's just understanding what the developer is willing to give on it. Cause if they're gonna push us into a corner and say, this is what we want, if you don't do that, we'll walk down the street. Well, then walk down the street now.
Well, and I would encourage you to see that, for multifamily and single family attached, in some cases, for the bedrooms, like the studio efficiency in one bedrooms, we did go down a little bit.
Yep.
But in the higher bedroom counts, we actually went up. So depending on the ratio of bedrooms that any project has, our parking regulations as proposed could require more parking spaces than we did before. Or, in some cases, it might be a little bit lower. But in all of those cases, we're consistent with our peer communities.
Right, have we bounced any of that off development, these new code changes or proposals?
That's why I had those developers come in and talk to you.
Yeah, but the changes that you just proposed tonight.
Yes.
That's from them as well?
All of it was done in conjunction with those folks, and,
Okay.
and, especially the two gentlemen from Gephardt, they do a lot of development up and down the regs, and so I worked very, closely with them to make sure that our regulations were in line with what they thought was fair. I also talked with, potential developer for the Welker Farms, and, told him what our proposal was, and he also thought that they were fair.
Okay, well, that's encouraging.
Yep.
That you've done, so thank you for that.
You bet.
That's it.
Just, can I say one thing back to just the conversation that we're having is the exact conversation that the state is so upset about. Like, if the state were watching our meeting tonight, that very concept that parking can control multifamily is antithetical to what the state's trying to do. If you followed the House Bill 213, the whole concept was to remove any parking regulation that would restrict multifamily and ADU development.
Mm-hmm.
So we could leave it alone and continue to have no multifamily here, which is an option. But at the end of the day, it may be in the next year or two that the state comes in and essentially knocks the legs out from under our parking regulations and says, you can't use those.
At this point, it seems that the state's gonna come in and knock our legs out on a lot of things.
Yeah.
So-
And I'm not saying you do it because of that. The answer to your original question is, we're simply we feel as staff, we're trying to get in the game of having different options for citizens to live here. Some people cannot afford a $1,900 apartment,
Right.
okay? They can't. And in order to create an opportunity for a $1,400 apartment, it has to come out of somewhere. And where it comes out of is the land required for the amount of parking. And I'm not trying to argue with you, I'm just saying, that's the genesis of where we went to try to come up with a way that if somebody's looking at Firestone to put in that same thing that you've seen everywhere, those 3-story ones, I've seen them in Longmont and Fort Collins, we don't have any here. And so we ask ourselves, why don't they come here? And one of the first things out of their mouths is, your parking regulations preclude us from doing it. So that's what we're doing. That's what we're just trying to get in line with other people. And the market, if it's a higher end apartment building, they're gonna build it anyhow. They're gonna have additional spaces. But that's the reason why we're doing it. So.
So I think part of what Herman's getting at is we want to compete, but we don't wanna kowtow to developers.
Yep.
That's the line that you walk, right? We wanna be competitive, we don't wanna make it absolutely ridiculous, but at the same time, I was pissed off when we went to 5-foot setbacks on single resident houses. I thought 7 was great, like it was perfect. I was pissed off when we went to 5-foot setbacks. People want more room if they can get more room. Nobody wants their neighbor's house this close to them, or at least, most people don't want their neighbor's house this close to them. But since every municipality allows 5-foot setbacks, that is what every developer is going to take absolute advantage of that and cram every freaking house in there that they possibly can. So I don't wanna kowtow to what developers want. I want to be fair, but at the same time, there's no reason for us to roll over and give them everything they want at the expense of the people that are going to live there and the people in the communities around them.
Mm-hmm.
So, that said, I think if we're going to require a certain number of spaces per unit, those required spaces need to be free. They should not have to pay for them. Now, if somebody, say, has a 3-bedroom unit and they only need 2 spaces, they should be able to sell those back to the apartment complex, and then the apartment complex maybe rents it out to somebody else who wants to pay an extra fee for an extra space because they only have a 2-bedroom unit and they need a 3rd. But I think that if we're gonna require them to build those 2 spaces, that if that's a requirement, then somebody shouldn't have to pay extra for it. It should just come with the space. The guest spaces, you said we're going from what currently is 1 for every 3 units to 1 for every 5 units, but if you actually look at the neighboring communities, some of them have nothing, but the other ones that actually do have something are all 1 per 3. So why are we going to 1 for 5 when all of our neighboring communities, some of them don't say anything about it, so I don't know if that means that they have absolutely no requirement for guest spaces whatsoever.
Yep.
I don't know, I just feel like that's not adequate, 1 for 5 units, I don't know.
Well, it was a very difficult calculus, right? Because in some cases, we're also requiring more parking spaces per unit than some of our competitors did. So we're trying to balance, how much is reasonable for guest parking versus how much is reasonable for parking spaces per unit. And so it's kind of a calculus, and in my conversations, originally, we did have it, as 1 to 5, since that was consistent with our existing code. But the developers were saying, wow, that's just, or I'm sorry, 1 to 3.
I think.
That's just
Yeah.
way too many, we can't make that work, and so, I increased the number of, we didn't have any guest parking requirements for multifamily at all, so we added that element to multifamily, but then in order to be consistent, I did lower that for single-family attached. And again, this is coming from, feedback that I received from developers. That doesn't mean we have to do that, but I'm just letting you know that it's, the more we increase the parking, the more, pushback there's gonna be from developers on the affordability.
But they'll just pass that cost on to
Yes,
the residents.
that's true.
Well, at least you know what you're getting into, I guess. I mean, okay, one thing that wasn't at all put in here is, you talked a lot about enclosed, but what about covered? I've seen a lot of, like, there's one in Boulder, as you're heading to Boulder, that's so unique, oh my
Oh,
gosh,
yeah,
it's so cool, it's had such a unique, look to the units, and it's really cool.
Yeah.
What about covered?
Yep.
I mean, like, you've got sun, hail, snow, I mean, you get everything here depending on the season, like, to have your space at least covered would just, is that, I don't know, I mean, are we getting into the whole thing of, well, if a developer wants to cater to that market, they'll build it, but I don't know, I really like the idea of covered.
Yeah.
Not enclosed, how much more expensive is it to cover it? I mean, I realize probably more than I think, but
Yeah.
I don't know,
A lot.
was that discussed?
It absolutely was.
Was that discussed?
It absolutely was, and again, a lot of pushback from the developers, like, now you're requiring that we're building for a certain, market, right? If you're requiring covered, now we're no longer able to provide sort of that lower end of the market. And as a planner, I can tell you that those covered spaces, if I have to require covered spaces, I want those spaces to look good, look nice, and match the architecture of the
Mhm.
building, so they're not those ugly tin ones that fall apart, So we're adding more expense, and then what percentage need to be covered? All of them? 50%? So it was one of those things where, in one of my answers to, trustee Schranz, I tend to defer to the market. I let the market's smarter than we are. And
Yeah,
they're
but
gonna-
I go back to that same thing as there's almost no one who would choose a 5-foot setback over a 7-foot setback from there. Nobody would choose that if they had the option, but when that's all a developer provides them, damn it, okay, that's what I'm going with. So when you say that the developers cater to the market, I'm sorry, but they dictate the market to a lot of extent by what they are willing to do and by what the municipalities that they build in make them do.
Right.
They will do as little as they can get away with to make as much money as they can possibly make. And you cannot tell me that that is not 100% accurate for almost every developer.
That's true, but I'll use my personal experience. So my wife and I, our first 2 houses had the 5-foot setbacks. We didn't like it. It was too tight. We wanted more elbow room, but in order to get that elbow room, we had to move to Windsor, where it's more expensive, and our house was more expensive.
Mhm.
So the market, we said, how important is that to us? Would we rather have, earlier in our life, a house that we can actually afford, or not have a house at all? But it's a little bit closer to your neighbor, and then when we made a little bit more money later in our life, we could move up to that, that has a little bit more elbow room. But, you're right, I mean, we can make requirements as strict as the trustees want to, but then we do have to remember, are we being competitive with our peer communities? Are developers gonna wanna develop here? Is it gonna be too expensive to develop here?
Yeah, but at the same time, most of this community here wants to keep the feel of the community. And I get that that can mean different things to different people. But I can guarantee you that the crammed in housing units with 5-foot setbacks are not what most people would choose in Mead if they have the option. I mean, not every, but it seems like every subdivision, that's what they put. They're cramming as many houses as they can. There's only a few of them that have been on the books for a long time, like Red Barn, that have the bigger lots and the bigger setbacks, and because they've been around, they were around and already in progress before things were changed. And I mean, like, I hate when developers come in here and say, well, we can't develop large acre lots, they just don't sell. Bullshit. They sell. They just don't want it, they just don't make enough money. They don't make as much money on those lots. That's why they don't wanna do them. It's not that they don't sell, but that's what they're gonna tell you, is that they don't sell. But they sell. They'll absolutely sell. There's not a house in my neighborhood that's been on the market for more than a week before it's sold. They'll sell. It's all a matter of how much money they wanna make up of it. So, anyways, I'm getting a little bit off topic here. So I don't know, this is hard because, like, I mean, I'm kind of with Herman, where it's like, I don't wanna kowtow to them. I don't wanna give up things just to appease them that could, down the road, affect the people that live there and affect the neighbors around it. And so I'm not sure where that line is. I don't know. I'll let Chris talk, or David talk, or somebody.
If there's specific studies that you want us to take a look at, we can bring more focused comparisons before the board if you want a little bit more time to think about, for instance, some of our ratios, or I'm willing to do whatever research you want me to do so you have more ability to compare what's being proposed versus.
I guess I just don't feel like it's such a bad thing that we're aiming towards a higher end market, maybe. I don't know. Maybe not though. At the same time, I've got kids who can't afford apartments without getting a roommate, and so I know exactly how this is all how this all goes. But yeah, sorry. Alright, I'll let somebody else talk.
I'm just stuck on the whole, I don't wanna have to, we're requiring 3 parking spots, they shouldn't have to pay for it. That's gonna price those apartments out of people's, without trying. That is my one sticking point. Because it's just, that's what'll get us into the Gateway North problem. That will get us what's currently happening in Longmont behind Walmart. Walmart is fighting with the developer because they're gonna charge for spots, and they're just gonna start parking on that street behind there. And it's gonna cause so many problems, and that's gonna make the neighborhoods even worse.
Yep.
I'm with Herman, you drive down my street, you are lucky if you can get a car sometimes, because of the amount of cars on it, but if we're requiring 3, 1 per bedroom, they shouldn't get to charge for it.
Okay.
Because we're requiring it. You know, if they wanna build extra, that's perfectly fine, that's all on them. But if we're requiring it, we should not say, oh, well, you're gonna get to charge, we're guaranteeing them making money, and that's a massive kowtow to developers. Giving them the option to just charge even more for that apartment.
Okay.
It's already astronomically pricing people out.
Yeah.
I mean, when rents are cheaper than buying a home for some people, or more expensive than buying a home, let's not make it worse.
Yeah.
That's my biggest sticking point there on that.
Thanks. We talked about this for how many hours, which is very interesting. I did, at the very beginning.
Okay.
Yep. So, we've talked about this for many hours. And parking is very important to a lot of people, and we've gone through this road, this last legislation, about how important parking is. And I'm going over my head about 100-unit, 3-bedroom parking situation would be. It's 320 right now. 334 with the guest one.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I'm just trying to figure out.
Yeah, compare.
The plot of land, how much would that be for 300 parking spaces for 100 unit, you know what I mean? So in my mind, it's like 2 times 3, like two-thirds is the parking. And do we have anywhere, my question is, do we have anywhere where, and Herman brought it up, about possibly having a parking structure in the town of Mead, vertical versus flat, you know what I mean, the
Yeah.
surface area.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that means, you know, I'm trying to figure out when you're going down Mead and you're going, I can see the very first thing that's coming out of this whole, very first, the multifamily is the structure for the parking is 4 times bigger than the unit, which is fine if this is what is gonna happen. But do we have anything in writing in this parking code that's forbids vertical versus, okay. So-
Nothing. So these are the minimum standards.
Right, and I'm all for what we're going forward to, because we're taking some of that hovering government regulation
Right.
out.
Right.
I love what we're doing here.
Right.
I'm trying to figure out how we're going to, I'm not gonna even say sell, but I'm just saying offer that this is what our regulations are. To 100 unit building with 300 minimum at a 3-bedroom. I mean, it's not gonna be all that, but I'm just, you know, I'm trying to get it around my mind how much space and how much real estate it takes for a 3-bedroom, 100 unit with the guest bedrooms, plus, you know, maybe some handicap, plus some EV. Is kind of like, what does that look like in my mind? And that's what our job is, to look at our policy and what that's a vision and what our comp plan means and all that stuff. And I'm all for taking that government crap and just throwing it away. I'm wondering what it's gonna look like, and that's the market driven. And I'm okay with parking, you know what I mean, but we've got to get some of this government out. We gotta get it out of our code. We have to make sure that there's a place in our vision for the comp plan for these diversity of living for these people.
Yeah.
And for our children and for our grandparents to be able to stay in this area for affordability. If we keep making more regulations that we do now, that's why they're not coming.
Mm-hmm.
And if we, going down the path that we're doing tonight, it's gonna reduce that overhead, it's gonna reduce some of the expenses. I'm hoping for affordable housing somewhere along the way. And if we don't do it, they're gonna do it
Yeah.
for us. And
Yeah.
this is what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
This 100 unit is gonna have 100 parking units. That's what's gonna, or 50, or
none.
maybe 5. So, once we get and I understand all the discussion here. How can we be competitive and be allowing the parking situation for the market to drive Mead to be on the map for multi-house? And I like what we're doing, I like the discussion I'd like to see what it looks like panned out with a 300 parking unit, you know what I mean?
So, you know, one of the things that,
I hope I'm making sense.
Yes,
I'm
I
trying to,
think-
I'm trying to like,
Yep.
you know, is it, are we gonna do it underground? You know, all these possibilities that we could always set forth, but is it possible to, you know, still go forward with this code, but still kind of make it, you know, when they come to these, you know, we're doing the preliminary plat and all these things that we're doing is making a great place for people to live and a great affordable place to live in the town of Mead. So that's where I'm going with that whole thing is, it's gotta be affordable, it's gotta be multifamily, it's gotta have whatever it takes, but it can't be something that looks like in New York. That's what the vision is, in my mind is so much that we need for a place to live. And we all come from different neighborhoods, all of us in this here. And it's very interesting how our children's children and grandparents and all this other have a vehicle and want a person.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we make it affordable for people to come and still have a place to live?
Yeah.
You know,
That's the
it's
balance.
really
That's
hard.
when
It's a
really hard.
balancing.
It's really
Yeah.
hard. The more regulations, the more requirements, the more your expenses go up. Yeah, it's really hard to find that balance, right?
I think to your point, Mayor, I think sometimes the models that we have been living under for the last 10, 15 years are what need to change, the building models. It's not so much that the city or the town regulating ourselves out of the business. I think developers need to start looking at some different models and different ways of accomplishing what they want to accomplish without putting the pressure on the city to give them what they want. I think there are different building models that they can begin to start looking at and developing. And I don't think they're doing that. I think they've got a set of plans that they have used in every city they go, and they come in here and say, pop it right there, that's where it belongs. And all we're saying is, you can plop it right there, but it doesn't need to look like that. Change the way it looks. Make space, make room available, okay? Do what you need to do, change your model. Don't take your standard architectural drawings that you've used for the last 20 years with minor modifications, throw them out, start with a whole new model. But I think it's us having conversations with the development people that say, look, we wanna work with you, okay? We don't wanna throw barriers up, but we have some responsibilities for the community as well. So we're suggesting that maybe you, working with us, look at some different ways to get some of these things accomplished. Instead of just coming back to us and saying, give me more space, give me more of this, give me more of that, or I won't build here. I don't need that kind of threat. I need you to build here, but I need you to work with our vision and our comp plans and all that kind of
But
stuff.
Herman, I think that's what Jason has proposed to us tonight.
Is
You
it?
know, I think he has done a great job, and we've talked about this before in the work session, that we're trying to work with, how to be competitive, you know, and to give the opportunity for diverse housing.
And I
And
agree.
this is part of the component.
And I agree, and
Yeah.
I hope I don't come across like I'm attacking staff, because I'm not. I think they've done a hell of a job.
I'm not taking that one.
I'm not going there at all with that. I'm just saying, I think as part of that, we continue some of these conversations, with developers and see what they can give on their side. And it's not so much, I'll give you an extra space, or that's not what I'm looking for, is what can you give me in your vision of how some of this stuff's gonna work? Maybe it's time for you to begin to change. Just like Trish said, cover and stuff, and then purdy and just like that. That's not a normal model, and I know that's addressing a particular market, okay? But somebody out there recognized that market, and they made some change to address that market. And I think that's all that we're saying here, is that if you can still do the affordable housing, you can still do it this way, but it doesn't necessarily have to look like it did yesterday. It could be different tomorrow. And that's all I'm saying. And it's a two-way street. I don't think you're gonna ask developers to make all the changes, but I don't think they should ask the town to make all the changes. I think there's some communion that happens, along that line. And I think with your marketing skills, it's an easy thing, I think, for you to sit with the developers and say, let's talk through some of this stuff. And just see, and maybe I'm all wet, maybe there aren't any models, maybe they're saying, that's good, this is what I'm gonna do, period, in the story, you know, and that tells you one thing. But, you know, they're gonna have to do, because they're running out of space, they're starting to look at me because they're running out of space in other cities and other communities.
Yeah.
So their standard,
They're saturated, they're
yeah,
getting
their
saturated.
standard model doesn't fit anymore in their spaces that are available. Here, it's wide open spaces, so they can plop those standard models that they have everywhere they go. As it becomes a cookie cutter kind of thing. So I understand what they're doing. But I'm like the rest of the board, I think there's still something to give. And I don't want us to back out. I think, to your point, I think we should stay competitive, we should be in there. We got the right goals, we're doing the right things. But I think we need developers to give us a little bit more, on their side.
So, I mean, it's like, I think of like metro districts and how so many, when those first started coming out, how many neighborhoods got freaking screwed by developers with metro districts. We came up with a code for metro districts for the sole purpose of making sure that our residents didn't get screwed by a metro district that came here with a developer.
Yep.
And that is government doing what it should do. I mean, when you say that we should let the market dictate what it wants, well, the market brought us Weld County's lovely piece of crap place over by Weld County Buildings. That's what the market brought, was that, because the county didn't require them to do anything. And now, the people that live there probably hate that they have to park everywhere, and everyone around there hates that that they're parking all over the streets and all over everything else. So while I understand, yes, we want the market to drive this to a degree, the market will take advantage of anything and everything that you let them take advantage of.
I think
So-
your illustration of the metro districts is really apt in this case, because, you know, I don't think any community went out and adopted those, master plans for metro districts just because. That was a reaction to the market, right? The metropolitan districts became a way of helping developers fund their developments, and so it became obligatory. I mean, it became, if you're gonna do a development, you have to allow metropolitan districts, or your town is just.
Yeah, but then the developers started to take
Right.
advantage of that
Right.
and leverage these neighborhoods to do these neighborhoods to do.
And to your point, that's the
because there
role
was
of
no
government, to
regulation.
say, okay, the metro districts, you know, we can ban them if we want, but then nobody's gonna come here.
Right.
So how do we frame the reality of the metro districts in a way that protects our citizens, but also, helps us to be competitive in the reality of the marketplace, right? And that's the balance. Same thing with
I think Trish's point is you don't want necessarily be reactive, you'd rather be more proactive.
Exactly, yeah, I would rather
Don't
be
wait for it to happen, and
proactive.
then say, okay, time out, now let's go do this and that.
I mean,
If we
like-
have an opportunity to be proactive, let's take it.
I'm just worried if we do the minimum standards, and I realize we're not doing the minimum, you've done a great job here, Jason. But if we do the minimum standard, this is what you can get away with, what I'm worried is that that's all we're gonna get. We're not gonna get ever the ones with the covered parking, we're not ever gonna get the ones with enclosed parking, we're not ever gonna get those higher end units, because, like, I don't know, like, is there
Well,
a
here's
way
the
to
idea.
frame it so that, okay, if one developer comes in and develops this, every one of them can't be the same, like, you can't offer 10,000 of the exact same product,
Mhm.
because that's what you can get away with offering.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, it's hard.
One of the options we could look at is incentivizing some of those things that we prefer they do, like covered parking, right? So maybe, I mean, I'm just off the top of my head, I'm
Mhm.
thinking, what if there is a certain reduction in the amount of parking that they have to provide, so long as a certain percentage was.
Jason, this is it, you're brainstorming, and that's exactly what needs to happen in this case. I think these wild, crazy ideas gotta come up, throw them on the wall, see what sticks. There's no bad ideas, and you're sitting here thinking,
Well, there actually are. I mean, there are, here's the
Yeah.
problem.
I know.
It isn't a negotiation. We don't have, a developer doesn't come in and say, let's talk about parking. Don't pay any attention to what you read in our code. We can work this out. That isn't gonna happen. And I'm sorry, but I have
I
to
don't think
be,
we're asking for that though, Helen. We're not asking to write code and then negotiate it. That's not what we're asking.
What are you asking?
well, then what,
I
then
think
it's,
we're asking to write code that is applicable to what's really going on.
but that's what we're
And that's a
proposing.
parking issue. There's not enough parking spaces. That's the issue. Now, you can sit there and say 1 for 3, 1 for 5, 1 for 10. There's still not enough parking places. What do you do with the overflow? Where does it go?
Okay, but I mean, if we say we change it and say we need 10 parking spaces per unit, per bedroom, we will never have any multifamily here. I mean, that's a way of blocking it. I get that. But it just simply can't be negotiated on a case-by-case basis. The market isn't a huge sponge where we're gonna have 10,000 apartment complexes here. There is
Oh, I
always.
think the way Colorado's housing prices are going, I think we are.
That's
I
falling
think we
every
are.
year.
Why don't we have
Nobody can
any
afford to buy
yet?
houses.
There's nobody here.
We have no one knocking at the door to do it. Okay, you can say we changed our setbacks. In the midst of this, we have range view. Those are half acre to 1 acre
But that's
lots.
because those were platted long before we changed our rules.
Well,
That's one of the examples of a subdivision that actually has large acre
but
lots.
we've got 2 subdivisions that have the 7.5 foot setbacks that aren't building. One is perfectly located next to the middle school. The reason it's not building is the builders aren't gonna build in that configuration, cause they're throwing away land. What we're trying to do with the parking is create an environment. We don't want the lousiest development, we want quality development, we're getting them. But to get our foot in the door, we have to have a basis to start by. That's all I'm saying. What I'm hearing tonight, we're not ready to adopt new regulations. We need to go back and relook at this. And we can create something that's a higher level, that the only apartments we'll get will be higher level, and that's okay. That's your job. If you wanna have apartments that are nicer and are more expensive, we can do that. We were trying to get in the game of being competitive with Berthoud and Firestone and Erie. We can make it so the threshold's higher, and we will do that. But we're just saying.
That's not what I'm necessarily asking. What I want is not everything to be the base minimum. And I think I like Jason's idea of doing something to incentivize them to provide something a little nicer than just the bare minimum that they can. That's all. I'm not saying we shouldn't have lower affordable housing or multifamily units, but what I'm worried is that's all that we're gonna get. And
Yeah.
I'm not worried about competing with Berthoud and Windsor and all those places. I mean, how many apartment buildings are in Berthoud? None. And they have something, so I'm not concerned about competing with them, I'm concerned about Mead. Okay, this is where my issue is. And I'm with Trish, I think there are different ways to get around this thing. And I don't think we're there yet. I think we're getting closer, but I don't think we're gonna make a decision tonight on that.
Sure.
But what you're hearing is a lot of concerns and issues from the board that needs to be addressed with the developer. They've come to us, they're the ones that came to us and said, we can't build there because you have tight that. So they're coming here, okay? They're already looking, because they're running out of geography, period. Everywhere they go, they're running out of geography, so they're coming here. They're gonna build here, something, they will build something. And that's okay, I think that's great. But I think that partnership needs to be built.
Well, I agree with you. I think to a certain extent that they're gonna build here if they want to, but we had developer walk away from Welter Farms because of the parking regs. The developer that's looking at, Mead Crossing, the live development, those developers that I brought to a working session, they said we won't build here with these parking regs.
I mean, I 100% agree that what we have is not reasonable.
Right.
Like, I 100% agree that making every space enclosed or even one enclosed, those are definitely gonna be way out of, upper end market, and to require every developer to do that, so I'm not trying to, I don't know, it's just hard, it's hard.
This is the
yeah.
second time we've come together, okay? We've talked about this for 2 hours, almost 3 hours, but going on 4 hours. So staff has done their best after the first iteration to bring us back what they heard, what we said to them. And now, what do we say to them now? What? What are we doing? Because they've provided what we asked them last time when we were together at the work session to be here tonight for this public hearing, which is on public. So, what are we else gonna tell staff to bring back so that it satisfies the board at the next work session, public hearing, whatever? But we have to make sure that you just can't say, bring us back some stuff.
I understand that.
So, the discussion should have been at the work session to say, listen, this is what we wanna see in the code. And this is tonight, during what we're in this public hearing, is we're now changing what we said before. So what do we say to staff?
But at that same work session, it was discussed the payment thing.
Yeah.
Several of us did,
Yeah.
we were very adamant that they shouldn't have to pay for, if it was a 3-bedroom and that, so that's, like I said, I know going on what's in there, that is, at least all of us in our agreement on that is a problem.
Right,
So,
so that's one thing.
that's one thing.
What's another thing? Because we need to move along, or not, on the parking regulations, hearing that we are so limited that we'll never get to
Yeah,
revision of the comp plan. I mean, that's the goal of the board.
and I can bring revisions, and I heard very loud and clear that instead of limiting how much a manager could charge for parking, we don't want that at all, right? That's an easy fix. So are there other aspects of the proposed amendment that you'd like me to revise or bring back or study and bring back?
Well, I for one like the idea of the differences between a studio, a one bedroom and 3 bedroom. I think that makes perfect sense.
Okay.
So I'm okay with that.
Okay.
The 1 and 5 for guests, I'm all right with that, because as far as I'm concerned, guests can park on the street, because it's temporary.
Mhm.
They're not gonna spend the night, right? So they're coming to see somebody, they can leave the next, in an hour.
Yeah.
So I'm okay with that. Is the people who live there, is there enough parking for them? Or is there enough parking opportunity for them? That's what I'm not comfortable with. And I'm not sure that we asked them for 1 for 3 or 1 for 5. That was staff that brought those ratios to us. We did ask them to bring something to us, and they did. And I'm just struggling with if it's enough, okay? Because really, what's in the back of my mind is the overflow. And you give them 1 for 3 and they do that, and that's fine, and there's gonna be overflow. And that falls on that gentleman's group. But now they have to police it, right? Cause you create other opportunities for different things to happen when you have all these
Theft,
cars
when
parked.
you've got all these cars parked on the streets
Vandalism, all that
and,
stuff. But that, I mean, you're gonna have cars on the street, I don't know any way around that.
yeah.
I really don't, unless they build some sort of a parking structure where people can come off the street and actually park on the property. So I don't know, do you think 1 for 3 is enough?
Yeah, I mean, it's more than we were requiring before. It's what I heard from multiple developers, it was reasonable. It's also, I also looked at, sort of best practices in planning journals and study guides and things like that. So I feel comfortable with it, but, this, like we've been saying all night, this is a delicate balance.
Yeah, it
And
is.
the minute you raise, the ratio in one area,
Something happens on the other side
yeah,
of the scale.
it's this delicate balance. So this was, staff's best attempt to try to balance all of these disparate, needs and requirements. Maybe you want me to bring, some developers back, at a work session, and we can have a discussion like this with developers.
Well, I don't know, developers just gonna stick to their guns,
Yeah.
they've got their
This
model
is-
on
yeah,
their check.
this
is what we want.
They're just
They
wasting
want
their
what they
time
want.
cards,
Yeah. Right.
So we can go with those changes, and then we'll react to what happens after they build it. Because they're gonna, to Trish's point, they'll build it and they're gone.
Yeah.
It's no longer their issue, it becomes ours.
Well, in all these ratios, if you look at our peer communities, these are all
It's
fairly
hard for me to
consistent.
do that, Jason, because I don't see very much building going on in the peer communities that you focused on.
Okay.
If they have some of these multifamily buildings going on, then I could go see it. I could go look at what's going on. Longmont does, but that's not one of these peer, that's not one of these.
And our standards are actually quite a bit higher than Longmont's. If you look at the comparison table, we actually are requiring quite a bit more than Longmont does.
Okay.
And same thing with Greeley, Greeley has a lot of, I don't remember if I included them on my comparison packet, but we are requiring way more than Greeley does.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
I guess, I realize that we have to move forward, and we have to try to make the best decision that we can, and that not everybody's gonna be happy with what we
I
decide to
can
do.
bring revisions back.
I know, and I would, okay, the one thing we're all adamant on is the fees.
Yep.
But
easy.
I would love to have staff get creative with some kind of incentives. Now, does that have to be in the code if we decide to incentivize?
I
If you
don't know
guys
what
can
that
come up
means.
with some
What, when you talk
incentives.
about
I don't know, he
incentivization,
brought it up.
yeah, I don't know what that means.
I'm not sure.
I mean, what
where,
would that,
where your
would
mind
that,
would go.
would it mean we would lessen the architectural standard? What incentivization would we have for, it costs so much money to produce a building with parking and amenities, okay? One apartment building says, you know what, I wanna put in a pool, cause I know there's no pools and I wanna attract people based on that. Another puts a gym in. These are the type of things that you would like to attract, but ultimately it costs money. So I don't understand with parking, if we required more, what would we take away from? That would ultimately work out so that we created an apartment that people could rent. That, you know what I mean? I mean, my kids pay like $2,000 a month to rent an apartment, an 800 square foot apartment in Longmont and in Loveland. So, you know, it's pricing people out. So anytime you incentivize, you're taking money from somewhere else or some requirement and lessening it to get that over there. This discussion is big. You're looking at just the parking piece. There's a lot of other things that people have to do. You know, we have requirements on the height. You know, that I look at a discussion we haven't had yet because it hasn't come back, but Highlandtown and the density and the height of the building that he would like to see. As I sit here and look at this parking discussion, I mean, it would really blow your mind to look at what he wants to do that's akin to a Manhattan level development. And I'm not minimizing this because it is really hard to grapple with this. But we'll go back and we can come back and we can put this on the back burner because we've seen 2 developments go away because of our parking standards. I don't think we're gonna get there. I think we have to really, really grapple with this some more to get where we can put it out there and frankly market it. Because it isn't working. Even getting to where we are here, Jason's a little bit on a slippery slope because I think they would want us to go a little bit further.
Oh, of course they would.
Right, but I mean but the fact of the matter is, it ultimately comes down to, do we really wanna have any multifamily? Because if we don't, then we can just leave the parking code the way it is.
I think you'll end up with multifamily. What level, it may be different, but depending on the discussion with parking. So you may not get the $1,400 a month guy, you may get the $1,700 a month, but it's better than the $2,000 a month.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's different categories, different grades.
Yeah.
I really don't think multifamily at one parking space per car is ever gonna come to me.
I don't think so either.
Never.
I hope you don't think that's what I'm proposing. I'm not doing a 1-for-1, but, there's a lot of cars. There's just a lot of metal out there, and what do I do with it all?
I mean, it's just the reality of the lack of transit in the rural places,
Yeah,
the rural place we
Great
live.
point.
I mean, if we lived in a denser city, yeah, you're gonna have lots of transit and lots more options. But here, everyone has to drive a car. Every kid, the second they turn 16, practically gets a car.
Or a truck.
Or a truck, yes. And it's just the way it is, unfortunately.
I think we're doing the right thing talking about this at this level, though. I think that's what
Yeah.
this board is here to do. It's not just a rollover. I think we're throwing a lot of stuff out there.
So I'm hearing,
He needs to,
we are wanting more spaces.
then 3 per 3, 1.
No, I'm fairly comfortable with everything you have as far as the number of spaces. The guest spaces, I'm a little iffy on, maybe 1 for 4, but I understand what you're saying, where we're going pretty high on the required per unit or per bedroom, therefore we're kinda going a little lower on guests, but at the same time, that kinda seems counterintuitive to me, because the more people you have in a unit, the more likely they are to have guests. Like, you get a teenager, and I tell you what, sometimes my house is a freaking parking lot with all of the teenage kids there. So, in some ways, that almost seems counterintuitive to say, okay, we're gonna require you 3 of those, but then we're gonna lower the number of guest spaces required. So that's one that I'm kinda sticking on.
Well, here's the comparison of
But that's-
34 spaces to 20. That's the
What?
difference.
I'm sorry, for what?
For guests, on a 100 unit. If there was 100 units, 34 for guests versus 20. So the weight shift from 1 to 5 and 1 to 3. So in that mindset, it's like 15-ish per 100.
You know, one thing that might be helpful, we provided this at the work session, but I didn't wanna get into it because it was so complicated, but, we used the proposed multifamily apartment, proposal for Mead Crossing. Cause they knew exactly what ratio of single, double, and 3-bedroom units they were gonna be proposing. And I could take that as a real project and say, here's what our existing code requires, here's what our proposed code
See,
requires.
I don't think you need to map out what our existing code requires. I don't think any of us are arguing that our existing code sucks. I think what the difference is maybe, okay, here's what, you know.
Here's what
Here's-
Mead would require versus somebody else.
Well, or maybe here's what we could require if we required 1 per 3 versus 1 per 5.
Okay,
As a difference, or, I don't know, I mean, I guess if everybody else is okay with 1 to 5, then that's a moot point. So I guess that kinda depends on what everybody else is thinking. But it would actually help me to visualize
okay.
what that looked like, or even get an aerial of another apartment complex that is similar to our requirements. If you don't, I don't know if Mead Crossing actually has like a layout that you could look at from cause I know a lot of our PUDs, they actually lay out all the parking spaces and everything else in it, they have to, right? So I would imagine that there would be one that you could find out there, or it would be too hard to visualize. I don't wanna be too complicated, I really don't, but
Clearly, the trustees need more information, so let me bring a real-life example and do some various scenarios and give you some scenarios.
okay.
Is that okay?
Yes, that would help, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Jason. Just full of good information tonight, aren't you? Alright, so I guess we'll set a time to be determined on when we can get more information, and we'll set up a work session later on in the summer, early fall, maybe later in the year.
How much time do you need?
He'll
A
need
while.
Yeah.
Cause he's going on vacation and he's got several other projects that he's working on, so.
Maybe
So
a couple
it's
months.
okay, we can take
Couple
the time
months.
it needs, I mean, whatever it takes, we'll do some homework and
Yeah.
come back.
Okay, thank you, trustees, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm gonna close the public hearing.
Yeah, I would say technically, so everybody understands, I don't know if Joshua wants to speak up and say something else, but, oh, he's raising his hand, let's let him speak.
Mr. Myers, would you like to speak?
Yes, Mayor, can you hear me?
Yes.
I was just going to say, if you're going to continue the discussion on it, then you would do your motion to continue the matter before the body to a date and time certain. Or are you wanting to actually close the discussion?
I will wait for somebody to make a motion to do whatever.
I would continue it to like that's a
Yeah.
first meeting in October, first meeting in October.
Yeah. Okay.
So we're gonna move to.
I'll move to
I know.
continue
We
the
can
public
open it then.
hearing to, well,
What's the first meeting
what,
in
yeah, I was gonna
October?
say, what's the first meeting in October? Is that
October 9th.
June, July,
Yeah,
August?
October
October
9th.
Or should we go on
October 9th.
September?
October 9th.
September's not close enough?
September
Too
11th.
close?
No, because we're right in the heart of budget, so let's make a more realistic date that we could hit.
And if we
Because
can
it's gonna
more
take a
time.
fair amount of work to try to come up with some other examples.
Okay. I will move to continue the public hearing to October 9th, 2023.
Second.
Trustee Hurst, at 6:00 PM to be held at the town hall or remotely.
At 6 p.m. to be held at town hall, also via remotely per our remote policy.
I'll make it a second.
Thank you very much. Roll call, please, Mary.
Trustee Adams,
Yes.
trustee Shranz,
Yes.
trustee Parr,
Yes.
trustee Harris,
Yes.
Mayor Whitlow.
Yes. Thank you very much. We'll go on to our second public hearing of the evening. We have no further general business.
Joshua's hand's still up. I don't know, does he need to say something more? Did we not cover it?
Please remember.
No, you did. I'm sorry, I just removed it.
Okay.
All right, again, we will have no further general business, so this brings us to our second regular public comment period. We would like to follow the same guidelines previously stated. Would anyone like to comment at this time? Please raise your hand. Okay, seeing none, any of the trustees would like to report on anything?
No.
David, do you have anything to bring up? Seeing none, all right.
Not at this time, Mayor. Thank you.
All right, this Saturday coming up is Coffee with the Mayor, and Fishing is Fun Clinic. That'll be a fun day. So with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay.
Roll call, please, Mary.
Trustee Adams,
Yes.
trustee Harris,
Yes.
trustee Shranz,
Yes.
trustee Parr,
Yes.
Mayor Whitlow.
Yes. Thank you. The May 30th, 2023 regular meeting of the Board of Trustees is now adjourned at 8:48. Thank you. Enjoy your night.